This is dedicated to the homies that was down since day one. Welcome to Drop D.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is Quick Hits, a news and notes podcast on the JFK assassination. I am but 50% of your host, Rob Clark. Along with me, as always, the lovely, beautiful, and talented Mr. Doug Campbell, everyone.
What is up, dude? What's going on, Rob? My man, all is cool in your world, I hope.
Oh, definitely, for sure. You know, except Momo having to sit here and wait 15 minutes for this while he goes and takes a crap. That's okay.
Dude, 15.
Thanks,
Fucking 15? What? Yeah, I'm surprised the smoke alarm didn't go off on his ass. He was in there so long. Hey, easy. Don't get upset, Momo. But we didn't, he was in there a while. We didn't really get much of a sound check. I mean, what is it like in there, Momo? What do you think?
You sound beautiful. Get on with it.
All right. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get on with it. We have a bunch of stuff we want to get into today. Let's dig right in. Oh, by the way, Rob, a very special first-time guest on the show. Sir, please introduce our guest, distinguished guest.
Yes, we are very, very proud to present to you, everyone, Mr. Jeff Crudele from JFK, the Enduring Secret podcast. Welcome, Jeff, to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
There's that $60,000 voice, Jeff. Oh, man.
Boom.
I love it.
Boom. Like molasses, man. Like molasses.
Right?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Okay, so I gotta say something about that, if you guys don't mind. When I got started in this, I thought I had, and I can't sing a tune. I can't sing one note. And I thought I couldn't do a podcast. And, 176 episodes later, one of my best friends who listens to the podcast says that not only do I have a good voice for this, but he can't listen to more than about 5 or 10 minutes of it, and he falls asleep. He never gets through an episode. So apparently I'm, also a substitute for a sleep aid.
One of my favorite podcasts, man. It's called Trifles. It's about Sherlockians. It's about Sherlock Holmes scholarship, right? And those guys, hey, if somebody's going to fall asleep to my stuff, that's fine, because those guys get 365 downloads a year from me. And it's all for bedtime. And I love that show, so I'm cool with it, But no, your voice, it's a very pleasant combination, sir, if I may say, of Perry Como and Pat Cooper. You know what I'm saying? So.
That's funny. Perry Como is from a tiny little town south of Pittsburgh. It's called Cannonsburg, and this is another one of those coinky dinkies. But I had two relatives who lived down the street in Cannonsburg from him when many years ago, when he was a much younger guy. So you can draw the links all over the place, can't you? Connections everywhere.
Man, degrees of separation, absolutely. Well, you know what? We get into a lot of that on here. Degrees of separation between different people, in the assassination narrative. It's crazy when you really the world that we study, it's a small group of people. If you boil down to it, you can go General Evan Walker, Felipe Vidal Santiago, John Martino, bam, 2 degrees, that kind of thing. It's a real small world that we study, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a newcomer to this. I didn't like most people. I got excited about it after the movie JFK, and I was a relatively young guy at that moment in time, and I've casually read a lot of books and watched a lot of videos and done what I think a lot of people have done over the years, and kind of wandered into the point at which I'm at now. And I want to be really clear. The two of you and you have such a unique set of podcasts. There isn't anybody on the air that does what the two of you do, with the such a highly technical and capable review of documents and such a logical discussion about how they might all fit together. And so you two are, you're gems. I can't say anything.
Now we're blushing, Jeff.
No, it really, and I know sometimes it may feel like it's a slog because there's, this is one of the most massive amount of materials in one place related to a murder case, but it's somehow you seem to make real sense of it all, and I'm fascinated. I can't wait to get when you do an episode, I can't wait to get on and listen.
Man, you're too kind, Mr. Jeff. Thank you so much for saying all that. Nice to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. A lot of gratitude, man.
Yeah, and for folks that are fans of both shows or all 3 or 4 shows, we're blowing minds right now. Their brains are melting, their worlds are colliding. So they don't know what's going on. But again, Jeff's podcast is called the JFK, The Enduring Secret.
Yeah, definitely check it out, guys. Definitely check it out.
Yes, definitely check it out. I'm sure you can listen anywhere you listen to our stuff. Just search for it. You'll find it. Isn't that right, Jeff? I'm pretty sure it's exclusively somewhere.
Yeah, I imagine if you hashtag JFK assassination in any podcasting platform, mobile app or whatever, then these 4 podcasts, R3 and Mr. Jeff's, are going to pop up together. Absolutely. And if you're listening to any of those 4, you need to be listening to all 4.
That's right.
Right on.
Download them all. Take them all in and digest them all.
Yeah, just put them all on shuffle and go to the beach. You'll learn so much.
Go walk your dog and just keep walking. Keep walking.
Right. You'll get
your
fit.
Walking bones.
See, that way it's mind and body gets fit. You learn stuff, Hell yeah.
I gotta tell you, you guys talk. You guys do a much better job about talking through the emails and the reviews and things like that. I'm probably a little more thin-skinned, and I don't. I try not to. I have to be in the right frame of mind to read them.
I only do it because Rob makes me. That's the only reason.
I think they're funny. I can't help it.
Yeah, you're in a better place. I think. Thankfully, I get pretty good.
You'll get there.
I get pretty good feedback, so I'm not too. But I got to share this one. This is an amazing thing. It actually was really positive. But God, I thought to myself, I can't reveal who this guy is because he might get fired at work. I did a show, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago with somebody else, and it was it was an interesting show. Somebody who hadn't heard me but had gotten to that show first was listening in and came over to our show and started listening, and he binged all 175 episodes. And then he listened to them again. So apparently he listened to 350 episodes in a 6-week period. And I was trying to do the math on it, and I wanted to mention it on the podcast, but I said, "Is this really true? I want to confirm it before I say it." And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "But I listen mostly at work, and the reason I had to listen to them twice is because you can't always pay attention, to all the details."
Hey, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly
300.
Right,
yeah, we love the bingers.
Yeah, 350 in about six or 8 weeks. That's a pretty amazing number.
Yeah,
that is definitely commendable. We love the bingers, man. We'll get people. Oh yeah, I just found the show and went back and listened to all the episodes in like the past month, and it's like, really? Wow, that's amazing.
That's happened before. Like concurrently,
yeah.
Jeff. Like I'll notice a spike in some province in Australia on. Like the Dallas accident or on my Quick Hits feed, or because we both got the Quick Hits feed, and Rob will go, "Yep, somebody in Australia has discovered our stuff," because he's getting the same spike on the Lone Gunman, and once that levels out, when they've listened to all the episodes, the spike goes away, It's a pretty neat phenomenon.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, and it's nice to have the metrics available from the podcast provider.
Dude, the analytics, yeah, that's pretty cool. We've got this is the funny part, man. There are two individuals, right, who have claimed to never, ever, they wouldn't listen to an episode of our shit with a gun to their head, right? But
one of them even thinks my name is Bob.
Right. He thinks Rob's name is Bob, but it never fails. I can watch the Spreaker analytics, right? One of these and it never fails, dude. It takes less than 2 hours. Every episode I upload, bam, my one listener in Burbank, California. Bam! My one listener in Vancouver, British Columbia, like fucking clockwork. And it's so funny because it's like, well, I don't guess they know I can see them with the analytics from Spreaker, but it's so, we like you say, man, the metrics are so cool. So cool.
Yeah, he'll claim it's.
So let's say hi to him, Doug, real quick. Hi, Burbank. Hi, Vancouver. We know you're listening.
Yeah. Hey, look. We know you say you don't listen.
But it's bullcrap.
Okay? That's what it is. All right. Anyway, enough of my... Oh, and Jeff, Mr. Jeff, thank you for joining us and taking this inevitable hit to your credibility. We really appreciate it. So...
It's my pleasure.
You'll get many new fans, I promise.
Yes.
I want to. I just want to say I resemble that remark.
Yes, you'll get dozens, if not dozens.
As do we.
Rob, you are on deck first, sir. I believe you have an interesting discussion topic related to JFK assassination research, news, and notes that you would like to bring to everyone's attention.
Yes. You know, if you count 30-year-old news, current information, sure, we'll go there.
Well, we'll
take that.
That one website does. So, you know.
Yeah. So I came across something interesting, right? So, you know, back in like 1990, when Gary Shaw and Joe West started pushing Roscoe White's son, Ricky White, you know, as having this new revealing information on his father.
And he was codenamed Mandarin, and then the information was subsequently stolen before it could be revealed to the public, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
You are correct. So I found this little...
I swear I had
it. I found this little interesting Ricky White chronology of his story.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. And you know, it's been asserted at different times, different things. And Roscoe White died under what they call suspicious circumstances. If you call welding over the top of a very volatile chemical suspicious.
Working while intoxicated.
Well, you know, I came across some court documents where they were suing the company that made the chemical because whatever chemical this was, it was being stored underneath of a welding table, and apparently it didn't have any kind of warning labels on it whatsoever. And actually there was a guy, Roscoe White's boss, was standing right beside him, helping him weld. When this happened, and he experienced third-degree burns all over his body as well, but he lived.
He should know better.
Roscoe White sadly did not. So they ended up suing this company that made this chemical because, you know, there wasn't any kind of warning label, yada, 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 right? So I found all these court documents, and I think they were suing the guy that lived, I believe, was awarded a whopping $14,000 for his injuries in the early 70s.
What are you looking at there? 140 G's? nowadays. 150
Yeah.
G's, roughly.
It basically covered his hospital stay and his lost wages, and that's pretty much about it.
Well, if he was the
He then
dumbass,
sued in civil court. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say if he's one of the dumbasses welding over a flammable chemical, then he's probably lucky they gave him that much.
Yeah. But again, there was no sticker on it, Doug, so they didn't know.
Oh well, no warning label. Okay.
Yes. And I believe the family of Roscoe White, Geneva, also had a lawsuit against this same company, and they were suing for much, much more. I think it was like $200,000 or $300,000. And I'm not sure the outcome of these trials. I just saw the initial court documents, initiating the court case. I don't know how these cases ended whatsoever. I just thought that was interesting. But so as far as Ricky White's story goes, okay, in 1975, JFK assassination photographs belonging to the late Roscoe White are taken during a break-in of the White home in Paris, Texas. The materials are recovered in Arizona and returned to Roscoe's widow, Geneva, now remarried, who notifies the FBI. FBI agents come to the White home on 2 occasions, and Roscoe's photographs subsequently are made available to the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Among Roscoe's materials is a photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald, which has never before surfaced.
Right, and this
its
is
origin remains a mystery.
Is this backyard photograph number? Which number was it?
C.
Okay, letter C, number 3, letter C.
Yeah. You familiar with that one, Jeff?
No, I'm not. I'm intrigued.
Okay, so up until the mid-'70s, there was only 2 versions. I believe it was the one that was found in Ruth Payne's garage and the one that George DeMornshield had, and they were 2 different poses of the backyard photograph.
Oh yeah, and the one with the Mornshield had something on the back of it, as I recall, right? It was written to him with a note.
Yeah, Hunter a fascist. Ha.
Right.
Right. Well, in the mid-'70s, they found Roscoe White had another pose of the backyard photograph never before seen anywhere in his possession, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, why would he have it?
Right. And supposedly there was another one that Marina burned the same day of the assassination. So there was ostensibly 4 different versions of the backyard photograph, 3 of which we have still today, one of which, of course, we didn't find out about until the mid-'70s from Roscoe White's widow. So we fast forward to 1978, and a longtime family friend who himself had worked for U.S. intelligence contacts Ricky White in Paris, Texas. He tells Ricky that he has learned that a congressional committee reinvestigating the Kennedy assassination has information that Roscoe Rock White was involved in the assassination and that this probably will be made public. Warning Ricky to be prepared for the eventuality, the man informs him that his father Roscoe had indeed killed John F. Kennedy. This comes as a shocking blow to Ricky, who refuses to believe it. Fast forward to 1982. Ricky White finds his father's military footlocker in Paris, Texas, and it contains a handwritten diary kept by his father. Ricky reads the diary, which refers to paramilitary operations in which Roscoe was seemingly involved. Ricky discovers that the journal contains specific details about the Kennedy assassination, including Roscoe's admission that he was one of the assassins. The diary outlines the logistics of the Dealey Plaza ambush and subsequent events which led to an encounter between Rock and fellow policeman J.D. Tippit. According to Roscoe's written account, he was the individual who fatally shot Tippit, and Ricky is, quote, shattered by what he reads. Fast forward to 1988. In May, Ricky White, now living in Midland, Texas, seeks the assistance of that city's DA in an attempt to access a safe deposit box at a Dallas bank. A key to the box had been found in Roscoe's military footlocker. The DA notifies the FBI, whose agents interrogate Ricky for nearly 5 hours and then take him to the federal building along with his father's personal effects, including the diary.
Now, I hadn't heard this.
Yeah. Now, upset by this ordeal, Ricky returns home with his father's belongings, and within hours, an FBI agent carrying a briefcase comes to the house saying that he left his notebook in the box containing Roscoe's things. He is alone momentarily with the box as Ricky's wife leaves the room to inform Ricky of the agent's presence. Later, it is discovered that the diary is missing from the box. Fast forward to 1990, June the 9th.
The FBI took it.
Using a cryptic written message left by his father, Ricky White travels to Paris, Texas, to his grandparents' empty house. And there in the attic, shielded by boards, Ricky discovers an unusual steel container. He returns to Midland before opening the container, and inside he finds 3 messages similar to cablegrams which allude to the Kennedy assassination. The documents bear Roscoe White's code name, Mandarin, and his military serial number. Also in the container are Roscoe's military dog tags bearing his serial number and thus identifying him as the recipient of these messages. All right, now for the benefit of the folks who have never heard these messages before, I'm going to read them right now.
Awesome.
There's 3 of them.
Here we go.
All right, so the first one. I'm just going to read them like they say. Navy Int, Code A, MRC, Remark Data 1666106, NRC, VRC, NAC 63.
That's got to be naval intelligence.
Remark. Yeah, I would assume so, yeah. Remarks Mandarin, Code A. Foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Contacts are being arranged now. Orders are subject to change at any time. Reply back if not understood. C. Bowers, OSHA, re-rifle, code AAA, destroy /on/. Okay?
All right.
That's the first one. Second one had very much the same header, except that instead of just 63, this has SEPT 63. Remarks Mandarin, Code A, Dallas destination chosen, your place hidden within the department. Contacts are within this letter. Continue on as planned. C. Bowers, OSHA, re-rifle, code AAA, destroy /on/.
You know,
that's the second one.
It says naval intelligence, and we know that Oswald was, Marines, and if the alleged false defector program, right? That many people allege that believe that he may have been involved in was probably most likely through naval intelligence because he was a Marine. So there's that, but through like our joint studies and things we both studied over the years, with what they said in the message there, hidden within the department. When you think about Army intelligence and the Dallas Police Department, how many of those guys were Army intelligence reservists, it would be more. It would pique my interest more, I think, if those messages seem to have come from Army intelligence rather than naval. You know what I mean? But I don't know what to make of these, but they're very interesting. Please continue. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Now, just remember the slight background information on all this is, okay, Roscoe White joined the Marines at about the same time Oswald did. he rode the same ship over to Japan that Oswald rode over.
Oh yeah,
on.
yeah, in the Marines, right?
We don't know for sure if they knew each other, but both being from Texas, the odds are that they probably would have met and talked at some point.
I wonder
they weren't
what
in like the same detachment or anything. But
do we know? Again, like chronology wise, when Roscoe White joined up, went through basic, as opposed to when Lee Oswald joined up and went through basic, like how close that was, I wonder. I don't know.
I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I just don't have it. I do know that he joined the Dallas Police in October of 1963. At the same time, about the same time Oswald got his job at the book depository.
Yep. And that's that would be about the time you'd want to load your guy, a guy or two in, your hidden guy within the department. But
yeah, his focus at the Dallas Police was on photography specialist.
Which would have been the intelligence division, the criminal intelligence division, probably, if you're doing photography.
Yeah, and at this time he would have still been in training. I don't think he actually finally took his oath and became a police officer full-fledged until January or February of 1964. And then he ended up quitting a year later to go work at a drugstore, like, most cops do.
Yeah. I think what's tantalizing about this, what's interesting about it to me, again, is the military intelligence inside the Dallas Police Department angle, because I think Rob and I agree. I don't know how where you're at with it, Mr. Jeff, but for the assassination, for that day to work out for those people, there had to have been some element of control within the Dallas Police Department, I think. And I think that's going to come from probably Army intelligence, but certainly military intelligence.
Oh yeah, there had to be an element involved, no doubt. In that regard, obviously, and I don't know what kind of credibility there is around this topic, but as what's her name, Beverly Oliver, she tells the story that she marches up to the top of the knoll and comes upon Roscoe White, and apparently she knew him. So he was placed there. Is that credible in your mind, that he was actually at the top of the knoll?
I don't think so. I mean, we have a lot of other reports of meeting some kind of individual identifying themselves or being perceived as a Secret Service agent or some other type of government agent, maybe having ID, maybe not, maybe just looking the part. Officer Joe Smith, one of the first Dallas cops to the top of the knoll, certainly didn't see Roscoe White. He encountered this person up there, and he's even caught on film. This mysterious person we're talking about here. I did a show about it a couple months ago. But yeah, I don't think any credibility to Beverly Oliver seeing anything, because she wasn't in Dealey Plaza that day. So
yeah, I doubt that she was babushka lady, so you got to doubt everything else. And plus, it's another one of those instances where people's stories just morphed and grew, and Roscoe White came up in the mid-'70s. Well, by the late 70s, I saw him up there too, so.
Yeah, and my comment was probably a red herring. I wasn't so much focused on the idea that Beverly Oliver was the one who said it, although she was the prominent one. My question was just
any corroboration for an ID of Roscoe White on the knoll.
Yeah, because that would, obviously that's the question, right? I mean, if he took a shot and he took a shot from there, or he was in the vicinity, did anyone see him in the vicinity right at the moment or around the time of the assassination?
As far as I'm aware, she's the only one that's ever claimed to have spotted him. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
Yeah, some people attribute it. The people think a badge man, and that image of somebody wearing an officer's uniform as either Tippit or White. one of the two. But I digress.
I tend to think of that, in Gail's first book, I believe, Gail Nix Jackson's first book. That her research, that it was probably someone if there was a badge man up there, then it was probably somebody that bought a surplus uniform. She did a lot of great research into that angle that I absolutely recommend. Yep, Honest Joe's. That's right.
That's
all right. So, yeah. So the question arises, of course, of the credibility of this whole thing and why the Ricky Don White story disappeared. Eventually, this didn't hang around very, 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 very long in the early 90s. And it was mostly due to the fact that it's pretty provable that Geneva White ended up forging this diary that the FBI allegedly stole, and that pretty much put a damper on all the credibility of everything that this whole story entails.
Yeah, once you get caught faking evidence, it's pretty much over.
Yeah, but does it mean that everything was bullshit, Doug?
Good question. We got to keep open minds. We got to keep our bullshit meters dialed up and dialed in and calibrated, but we got to keep open minds, Rob.
That's right. So I kept digging, and I found a polygraph examination of Ricky Don White done on July 27th, 1990, and it's in the form of a affidavit signed and notarized by a notary public in and for the state of Texas by Belinda Alvarado. Okay, so the company that did this, first of all, you have to look at the legitimacy of the polygraph examiner. So, if you're just going to some Joe Schmo, the chances of, it being an accurate lie detector test goes down significantly. So,
Rob, can you just excuse me?
Yes,
for one
sir.
minute? Can you give context? I mean, was this on his own? He sought to get a lie detector test in order to prove his own credibility, or did a third party or a law enforcement agency ask for it?
This was done of their own volition because of the accusations that Ricky Don White was lying. They wanted third-party proof that Ricky Don White was telling the truth.
Okay. Man, that could be a be careful what you wish for sort of scenario, You got to be careful about that stuff.
Right. Yeah, so, as we read about in the lore of the Kennedy assassination, a lot of these polygraph examinations were done by certain specialists in the police departments who knew how to give these tests, or the FBI, something like that. But this one was done by some place called the Integrity Center. And it says, quote, helping to advance corporate security, a unit of Integrity Centers Corporation, Suite 215, West Mockingbird Lane, Dallas, Texas. So I did a little checking about this. I found out that they'd been in business about 6 years. They started up in 1984. So at the time of this polygraph examination, they had been doing them, like I say, for about 6 years, and they had been open for about 6 years. And this company does a lot of things like corporate security, background checks, credit checks, polygraph examinations. And actually, they are still around today. So they have been in business for 40 years. And it says your employees are your company's greatest assets, and we can help you, with full FCRA packets, attached email, templates for your use in background checking applicants.
So they would
have
be all the certifications.
Yeah, you really have to put that in context of the '60s. I mean, isn't it really just one more punctuation point about how different it is today than it was then? I mean,
Yeah.
how often do you think today in corporate America somebody would be subjected to a lie detector test in order to have corporate integrity? Hardly ever. And
Right.
I mean, not only is it considered in today's environment to be highly unreliable and for many reasons potentially, but it's also just totally sort of socially inappropriate as a tool. But it's interesting that it was so heavily used back then, and even in not only in law enforcement but in just general sort of corporate affairs.
Oh yeah, and in this business, they also employed hundreds of private investigators. They have nationwide service, 100% FCRA compliance, and full professionally licensed staff. No voicemail ever. You will always get to speak to a licensed investigator when you call.
It sounds like you know what it sounds like? The modern day Robert
legit.
Mayhew and Associates.
Right. Guy Bannister and Associates. Hello.
That's right. But man, Mayhew was kind of like that guy. He was like the first one of those guys, man. Companies like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this lie detector test that Mr. Ricky Don White. So we'll go through the questions and answers, and then I'll let you know whether or not he was either telling the truth or being deceptive afterwards. It's 15 questions, and we start off with number 1. Have you ever read any books on the JFK assassination? What do y'all think he said?
Well, hopefully he didn't say no.
Yeah. Well, okay. What do you think he said versus what do I think the truth is? I wouldn't imagine he would deny it at that point, would he? No, surely not.
Well, he said no, that he had not read any JFK books on the assassination.
In 1990?
And in 1990.
Nah, sorry, man. Sorry.
Well, you're wrong. Test results, no deception indicated on that question.
Wow.
Number 2.
I'm
have
legitimately
you ever seen
shocked.
a diary? Yeah. Well, just wait. Hold on to your hat. Have you ever seen a diary written by your father? What do you think he said?
Well, hopefully he said yes.
You would be correct, Jeff. He did say yes. And he was found to be telling the truth. No deception indicated in that answer. So he did see a diary written by his father at some point.
Number
3 question.
They didn't say, did you see a diary written by your father about the Kennedy assassination?
True. They did not. True. So they asked him, number 3, did you read your father's diary? Of course, he says yes. And no deception indicated. Question 4, do you know where your father's diary is now? What do you think he said?
No.
Correct. He did say no. And no deception indicated. Okay. Number 5, did you take your father's diary to the FBI? He says yes. No deception indicated.
All right, he's doing pretty good so far.
Number 6, did the Tippit family live across the street from you in 1964? Did the Tippit family live across the street from you in 1964? Now, the reason they asked him this question is because it came up that Roscoe White and J.D. Tippit were good friends, and the families were good friends with each other. Marie Tippit denied this.
Really?
That they were good friends, you mean?
Yeah.
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 She
So that's
did
why
not.
they asked this question.
Did she deny that they knew each other?
No. So he says yes. The Tippett family did live across the street from them in 1964. No deception indicated. Number 7. Did your mother ever work for Jack Ruby? His response was yes, and no deception indicated. Number 8. Did you find for the first time within the past 2 months a container of 3 typed messages in the attic of your grandparents' home in Paris, Texas? What do you think he said?
Yes.
Of course, he says yes, and no deception indicated. Number 9, have you ever seen these typed messages before you found them in the attic within the past 2 months? And he says no. What do you think happened there?
There's a pattern developing here, and I would suggest it might be no deception.
Well, he answers that question no, because if he had seen these typed messages before he allegedly found them in the attic, that would imply that they were made by someone and planted there for, to him to find with his knowledge. His response is no. And again, Jeff, you are very, very perceptive. The answer is no deception indicated. Number 10, do you know where the witness elimination record book is now? And he says yes.
Witness
now,
elimination record book.
Yeah, what he's referring to here is apparently in further communications from whoever was sending these Mandarin messages, okay, that Roscoe White had a kill list of witnesses that he was supposed to kill, after the assassination that I guess he had worked on for a couple years in his spare time.
His to-do list.
Yeah. And he says yes. He knows where the witness elimination record book is now. No deception indicated. 11. Has your father's diary been altered by you, Ricky Don White? He says no, and that's the truth. Pretty sure it was his mother. Number 12.
Yeah.
Have you altered the contents of the witness elimination record book? He says no, and he's telling the truth. Number 13. Did you read in your father's diary that he was one of 3 men who fired the shots that killed President Kennedy? He says yes. And he's telling the truth, folks. Number 14. This is a pretty easy one. Of course, they have to have some of these control ones in there, I guess. Was your father Roscoe Anthony White? Response, yes. And of course, he's telling the truth. Number 15. Did you read in your father's diary that your father said he shot an officer at 10th and Patton? Response, yes. And no deception indicated. Ricky Don White, a polygraph test was administered. Polygrams produced tend to verify truthfulness on responses to all questions. Test results. No deception indicated. And what's interesting here, you know what the examiner's name is?
What's that?
It looks like Billy J. Hargis.
That's funny.
No shit.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's a coincidence,
Who, of course, was a motorcycle cop in 1963 for the Dallas Police Force. Now, whether or not it's the same person, I don't know. And of
Wait,
course,
that's not the Hargis. That's not the preacher that Walker was running around with.
Maybe am
on
I
the
getting
midnight
mixed
ride,
up here?
Billy J. Hargis.
Oh, I thought you
Wasn't
guys
there-
were referring to the motorcycle cop that.
Yeah, isn't there a motorcycle cop with the
There
same
is.
name?
Yeah.
one's Billy
yeah.
Joe, one's Billy James, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Billy Joe's the motorcycle cop, I believe.
Oh wow, man,
Right, so
Rob,
it's
you're
either
gonna have to. It's like
it's
the
either
John
a damn
Martin
preacher or it's a former cop.
Yeah. But yeah,
two.
there is the preacher was Hargis also. I'm not like imagining that, am I?
I don't know.
The midnight.
I don't think so.
Now I'm at the Google it. I know it is. Let's see. The
I
midnight.
think he's Billy James, and maybe this cat's Billy Joe.
The Midnight Ride. General Walker. Midnight Ride.
Yeah, while you Google that, I'll soliloquy here a little bit and kind of wrap this up.
Because
So
it's not
basically,
like
what I'm
it's not like we have a producer in there doing nothing that could do this for me. But go ahead.
So basically, to wrap this up, this whole little Ricky Don White thing. So this is why everything went away. You know, when it came out that the diary had been faked, but was everything faked? When you have Ricky Don White at the age of 40 in 1990, telling the truth, truthfully answering, no deception indicated on any of his answers done by this independent security firm who's still around today, which means that they've probably done good work because, you know, businesses of this type tend not to stick around very long if they do shoddy business. So,
man, I got to give it. I got to give it to you.
Around like for 45 years or so, 46 years, and they're still around doing the same thing and even expanding what they do. So it could be legit, you know. So
that is an extraordinary performance during a polygraph examination for a witness. I will say that. And how could it not lend credibility unless he was just extreme? He was an individual who was extremely comfortable in being deceitful. But I don't know. I don't mean that disparagingly because I don't really know that much about the guy. That's all I'm saying. It could be that what Rob just said could be legit.
Well, when I listen to it, I two things come to mind. Number one, you want independence and objectivity of the third party polygraph group, and it sounds like there is pretty reasonable evidence that is there. The other issue is when you're doing it in a law enforcement environment, you understand the context of the case and you set forth a series of questions that are probative in nature. And this group of questions was probably drafted by Roscoe White and himself. And they're all very legitimate questions. They're all the right kind of questions to ask. In order to determine if he's telling
White? Well, probably his people.
Or Ricky White. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Not Roscoe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point there is that if you were a law enforcement officer and you're asking, other probative questions, there probably would have been other questions along with those that were asked that potentially, could have had other answers to them. So he did this. You always have to ask yourself who paid for it, why were they doing it. They certainly were doing it to try to bring credibility to themselves, and it sounds like they have. I'm not disputing any of it, but
that's a very good point, Jeff. And you got to also take into consideration the bunch of nut jobs that he decided to hang his hat on. Now, this is the same crew, Joe West and Associates, and Gary Shaw, who are responsible for Beverly Oliver, James Files.
Oh boy, that
Chauncey
right there.
Holt.
That's nullification. James Files in my mind.
The nutbag shit.
Yeah,
that was coming out at the early '90s in the wake of the JFK movie. This is the kind of shit that was going on back then. So he may have went with the wrong horse here if he was actually legit. So yeah. Will the world ever know the truth? Doubtful.
Well,
but,
it's a great.
They always say where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's always something else to dig into.
It's another great example of a piece of evidence that's what I call on the precipice. It would be pretty easy. it would be pretty easy to lean in and say that really does give credibility to it. And I think it, it may very well. But on the other hand, it could be severely criticized, and you'd have a difficult time stepping back and saying no. It would be interesting. You guys go so deep into this; it's absolutely amazing. I just love to listen to it. Probably, it's 30 years or 30 plus years now, and corporate records are probably not maintained in that environment for that long. But it would be really interesting to have the company make comment on it. Like, who actually was the examiner? Were they there for a long time? Did they have any relationships to White? Could there have been any other, thing going on there? Was it a longstanding, highly, employee with high integrity, blah, blah, blah. That kind of stuff would be an interesting comment on whether it really was independent and objective. I mean, it certainly seems like it is on the surface.
Yeah. I like what you said there, a piece of evidence on the precipice, because as far as Roscoe White goes, I was just thinking that I think it boils down to that backyard photograph for me. If we could ascertain exactly how Roscoe White came into possession, if we could figure out the circumstances of that, that would either go, well, it's benign, he just got it because he was at the police department or whatever, or either he's involved or he's not. And I think finding out exactly how he got that photograph would tell us one way or the other whether he was more than likely involved or not involved.
Have alleged that Roscoe White is the body in that backyard photograph, and they've even pointed to, like this bone anomaly on his wrist and the way he stood. There's other photographs of him standing this way.
Yeah,
it's such an odd way to stand.
But we've recently also seen, you and I, another, the other photograph of someone else in that exact same spot, who's also tangentially connected to the assassination.
Yeah.
And that, which one? And that's Steve Wilson, right? Am I getting that right? The name?
Yeah.
Interpin Steve Wilson. And that is an absolutely striking photograph to me. So, was it him or was it Wilson? I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Some people have alleged that.
Yeah, and you couple all this with his ties to Oswald, being in the Marines at the same time, being in Japan at the same time, coming back to Dallas at the same time, and entering into their respective positions at about the same time. And if you buy into the whole witness elimination theory of people dying right after the assassination, well, somebody's got to be killing these people. Who is it? Well,
that's right.
The fact that Roscoe White has an elimination list, with somebody's names on it, that's kind of suspect, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a topic that maybe you all I'm not too versed on, but I've always been curious about, because there's always this sort of black box behind the curtain discussion about how all that happened, and there had to be a set of operatives doing it. And, it seems logical that somebody like that in the police force that would have more fluid capabilities to commit those kind of crimes, especially in the Dallas area, particularly with witnesses who were there in Dealey Plaza, or who knew Ruby or might have heard something about the local plans. Is there much on that out there? Because,
well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Jeff, because in the Marines, I believe Roscoe White was a mechanic. So he was very mechanically oriented, if you will, experienced welder, very good with his hands. A lot of these mysterious automobile deaths, come at the expense of, maybe something was done mechanically to the car, the brakes, the brake lines,
steering,
something else.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's something, you could go do in the middle of the night with a flashlight,
Hey, man.
Be done with it other times.
A guy that knows which.
If you have that cover as a police officer, you can, and you
exactly
have the uniform and you have the look, how to go about it.
And you know what? A guy that knows what 2 wrenches he needs can jump under a car in a parking lot and loosen up steering linkage in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the cars of that day.
Yeah, even in the daytime.
Oh, yeah.
You know, wouldn't take much.
Exactly. But yeah, that's all I had with Roscoe White, fellas. Hopefully,
well, I appreciate that,
eyebrow
Rob.
or two.
Dude, I appreciate that because I really do, and I'm grateful for it because you know a lot more about the Roscoe White side of things in the research than I do. And absolutely, if you don't hear a lot of that, like especially the polygraph, things like that, you know, you might not be so open-minded, and I will be from now on when I read about that stuff because, you know, especially with the photograph, like I said, that's pretty pivotal. I think
because a lot of people hear Roscoe White and they automatically jump to the conclusion of that's a bunch of horse shit.
Right.
That's been proven. That's bullshit. You know, there's nothing to it. You know, it's conspiracy theory, fluff, buff, whatever nonsense.
It could be just
I think
Ricky and his family had the misfortune to have it was like a toss-up. Well, some of the crazies in the community got to him first rather than maybe more reasonable people in the community that could have helped him in a more legitimate way, right?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't doing this to make money. They made plenty of money off his death, believe me.
Yeah.
In the court case suing this chemical company. So this wasn't a money grab by any means.
No,
so
I agree.
They had their money grab in the 70s when they sued the hell out of this chemical manufacturer and won. So
there's no money motive.
Interesting,
you know?
Nonetheless.
Yeah.
No.
Well, thank you for all that, Mr. Rob.
Yeah, that was absolutely fascinating.
Fascinating and interesting, and unfortunately, I have to be the guy to bring everybody down. We had a little bit of more a stumbling block thrown in our way. We have out of D.C. regarding the JFK Records Act. We have a special report. Okay, guys. On June 30th of this year, gentlemen, June 30th, after an after-hours midnight, on the Friday night before a long national holiday weekend, the current presidential administration, President Biden, issued a memorandum that essentially tries to turn the lights out on the JFK Records Act, a law that both our current president and his orange predecessor both decided to openly defy already. Remember, according to the JFK Records Act, we were supposed to have everything completely unredacted by October of 2017. But, of course, Trump caved, then he caved again, and now Biden doesn't look like he's caving. It looks like he's just joining the other. Anyway, pretty disgusted by it all, but now apparently the JFK Act has been declared, gentlemen, null and void. Your initial reaction upon hearing this, gentlemen, Jeff?
Well, I mean, it's a shame. You were getting to the near end of all these documents, we think, and you know, the fundamental question is why. If I can say a couple of things about what's happening with this, the ARRB, as it wound down business in 1998, went on record and made a final determination for each of the records in the collection that existed at that time. There's no question as to whether or not they should have been released. There was actually criteria set forth as to how they should be released, and they all should have been released probably in dribs and drabs had this been administered properly from about 1998 all the way through 2017. And yet there wasn't much that was released in that time frame, and there wasn't really much pushback. There wasn't as much pushback as there should have been from the research community. So when 17 came, it was like a grand date. And,
oh, yeah.
And that's it really, honestly, it allowed the government to begin positioning. And I think, unfortunately, we have a circumstance where there has been, Trump came in. He, among many things he said he was going to release all the records. And I think that really stirred up things to the point where, as you all know, they on the date they should have produced them, they didn't. And the Gannon memo came out, which was really the precursor to all these things they're doing. If you trace this all back, there's a series of things that have happened that it didn't just happen in the culmination of this latest decision that happened in San Francisco. It's been happening, and I think the CIA and other national security elements have decided that it wasn't enough to sort of rope-a-dope in a very benign environment. Now that things are heated up after the anniversary date and people are really getting engaged in it, that they had to take severe action to disarm a piece of legislation. I mean, it's effectively removed the applicability of Section 6 of that agreement, and that has effectively gutted a piece of legislation. And and unfortunately, there are, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but I sometimes play one on TV. If you look at the claim that got filed, while there was a minor victory in it in some ways, I wouldn't say minor, maybe it's major in some ways, to preserve the potential extraction of records from non-executive branch venues, such as what remains in the church committee, and some of those things are very, very critical. I think
valuable.
To getting at the truth, but what I think it failed to do, and I think there's a line that really stands out in the judge's decision, where it was very clear that the claim did not specify problems with ministerial duties that probably, had they been more well defined in the claim itself, that there may have been some level of evidence that may have been a different outcome in this. But I'm not trying to criticize the drafting of it, but we clearly have evidence now that the judge has ruled that there are some things that, had they been in there, perhaps there would have been a different view from the court. Now, the court has a lot of flawed things in the middle of it as well too. If you look at the decision, for instance, they say that there's no requirement to do certain things on each claim, when in fact, at least as a layperson, when I go back and read the sections, I would flatly disagree with what's in that. So there's probably, and I don't, I've been in and out of some of the discussions with the folks who have drafted that claim, and I think they're thinking that, obviously there's going to be a TBC on this, and whether they take it to the next level, I mean, whether the appellate courts will view those particular aspects differently, you don't know. But, right now it's in its current state. It's, other than the records that sit outside the executive branch, it's pretty well gutted.
I agree. It's kind of I don't even know what to think of it, Rob. I've got the memo here. Let's read a little bit of this. Very, very.
Well, before you do, let me just chime in here.
Yeah, very sound analysis, Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, I think Jeff made a very good point about the speed at which we got these releases. At the end of the ARRB, I believe in 97, 98, there was a shit ton of documents that got released. Researchers were very elated to have all these new documents to go through. And it kind of petered off after that to very non-fanfare type things until you start getting towards the end of the 25-year period where everything should be released finally.
Yeah, toward the fall of 2017, we got a few big batches of stuff around that time.
Yeah, but a lot of it had been out before, just previously redacted, you know, type of things. Nothing really new in these releases, and if there is something new, it doesn't really have much to do with the Kennedy assassination itself. It more has to do with what the CIA was doing when it comes to Cuba and Mexico City, things like this, and their sources and methods and people they were utilizing, which is interesting.
A treasure trove. I mean, that was absolute, still is a treasure trove. And I'm still reading through those releases, as a matter of fact.
But you'll find 95% of them have nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination, but it is interesting nonetheless what they were doing, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's astonishing to me is that prior to finishing their work in 1998, they took each and every record, made a final determination of it, placed it in the inventory, and there was a clear path right then about what the criteria would need to be in order to release the record. And there was virtually no administration of that combined set of directions from about 98 on. And it's amazing that, and again, it's not being critical of anybody, but with it being so high profile, and certainly you can't peer in on the other side, right? So you don't really have complete visibility into how they're doing it. But the very fact that such a limited amount was coming out in that short time frame really begs the question of why there wasn't more noise about it, because they clearly figured out that nobody was going to push back or make large litigation thrusts to compel them to do it, and they just let it ride. And until they couldn't do that anymore, and they had to take really overt action after the anniversary date. And make no mistake about it, every one of those records had criteria at the end of 98, every one of them, redactions and all, to get released.
I want to read you guys a little bit here. I'm going to skip around and read a little bit of this memo. Some of it's pretty interesting. It's a lot of legal speak kind of thing, but it's June 30th. It was issued memorandum on certifications regarding disclosure of information in certain records related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This part right here, I'll skip over a bunch of it, but this was what do we say here? Section 3 of the memo. I hereby certify, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, including Section 5G, 2D, blah, 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 of the Act, the continued postponement of public disclosures of that information is necessary to protect against identifiable harm to the military defense, intelligence operations, law enforcement, and the conduct of foreign relations that are of such gravity that they outweigh the public interest in disclosure. 60 years.
Yeah, I mean,
60 years.
What could outweigh at this stage of life? Has such gravity that could outweigh the public interest in seeing what's in them?
I'm going to translate it, kinda. I think that might mean it's too early to tell you the truth that we, the United States government, were running / using this guy Lee Oswald in some shady shit, and some really mad, really capable, really vicious, violent guys that the U.S. government trained, employed, and used and operated, murdered the president, piggybacked U.S. government ops to do it, framed Oswald, and everybody in the government freaked out, quite frankly, panicked, and covered it all up. I think that's what that sentence means.
I think the ramifications of it, Doug, are that, let's say that's true, because it may very well be. 60 years later, this event in and of itself, I think the American public could swallow, because there's been 60 years of the application of a way to try to introduce it conceptually into the American psyche. Where I think the problem lies now for the U.S. government is that there's been a series of very large things that have happened in our world since then, that if you come out and absolutely, commit a mea culpa here, that this actually happened. The problem with it is, even if the American public accepts that this today is the truth about what happened in 1963, if you begin to extrapolate it, and the public inevitably will, whether it's true or not, they inevitably will extrapolate it to things like 9/11,
everything,
and other moments in history. And I think that's close enough to the current, that they're just worried about pulling on this string and what the ripple effect might be. I don't think it's so much the assassination itself today.
And I think
and very perceptive people are already doing that.
Yeah.
They're already, figuring that the government had some kind of culpability in this whole thing, in one form or fashion. And I think in the 70s, they got a very good glimpse inside the inner workings of the CIA. And, the belief that our government could do something like this was definitely and certainly there. And, those still paying attention to all this today, if you ask a JFK assassination conspiracy theorist today how much credibility that they put in, official government stories about anything, whether it be 9/11, Waco, Ruby Ridge, you name it on so-and-so down the line, automatically we're going to be questioning the government's version of events, because we know that in the past they haven't been forthcoming or even truthful in the matter. So if that happened on a very large scale outside of, our community, like you said, the ripple effects would definitely be something that they could not ignore and just wouldn't go away very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a totally unintended consequence of being truthful, because even if the current administration, even if everybody today, which we, I'm not suggesting they are, but even if everybody in the government today was lily white and perfect and did everything the way the civics textbooks describe it to be, there would still be a taint on them as a result of this. And I think that their concerns are that we're just not far enough. It's not Lincoln-like history. If you heard today that there was a complete conspiracy about the Lincoln assassination, you go, okay, that's interesting. And then you'd move on and buy a sandwich. But we're still only 60 years out. And I think for many people, the historical time frame, particularly those that are active in the senior security apparatuses of the United States, are not yet comfortable that it's far enough out. And I think it's a very broad conclusion that they've made, and they're effectively deciding to circumvent the law. Clearly, in the time frame that this was done, in 92 and then in 98, 3 years prior to 9/11, they couldn't foresee these other things happening. And I think that that moment, the people in charge felt like another 25 years, it'd be almost 60 years out, was enough. But there's enough happened between now and then that this whole thing has been rethought, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And I want to commend you, Jeff, for your use of the word taint in that soliloquy.
Yeah.
It's greatly appreciated here on Quick Hits.
You go into you go into the
the
Quick Hits
story.
Hall of Fame when you drop that word in conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
God bless you.
In a statement issued by Assassination Archives Research Center President Dan Alcorn, the Assassination Archives and Research Center said the following in response to the news of this presidential memo, guys. I don't think the word taint's in it, Rob. I'm sorry. The AARC said in a midnight Friday night announcement, the White House has delivered the bad news that President Biden will be maintaining secrecy indefinitely on some JFK assassination-related records. This is unwelcome news for transparency advocates and concerned citizens of the country. In 1992, the JFK Records Act was passed unanimously by Congress with the promise that all assassination-related records would be released no later than October of 2017, 25 years after enactment. This promise has not been kept and in fact has been broken with this announcement. By far, the best course of action for the government is to make full release of JFK assassination records to restore some public trust. The opportunity is lost for now. Now, guys, in the legal battle for the JFK records, in full disclosure, we did have another development. There was an opinion by the court, and Mr. Jeff, you alluded to it earlier, on July 14th, and we have this official statement from the plaintiffs that was issued that day, the Mary Farrell Foundation. The statement reads, the July 14 court order provided several victories for the plaintiffs, including the right to seek immediate release of 1,720 assassination records created due to legislative action by the Church Committee and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That is huge news as far as I'm concerned. The right to investigate the history of the documents destroyed in the course of the JFK investigations, and the right to compel improvement in the usability of the National Archives JFK collection. However, the court's order also narrowed the scope of our lawsuit by not providing a transparent process for the release of other assassination records. We are reviewing all of our options. Rob, Jeff, one of our dearest friends over here is Mr. Bill Simpich, and he is, I like to say, one of the big brains studying all this. He said this on July 16th, and he's actually the lead attorney of record on the Mary Farrell lawsuit. Bill issued this statement. The full outline of the lawsuit is still unresolved. The Mary Farrell Foundation statement outlines the case as it exists today. According to Bill, the judge's decision was a mixed bag with victories and defeats for both sides. Both sides have the option to take action to affect the shape of the lawsuit in the days to come. This is not a hard and fixed situation yet. Mary Farrell Foundation, Tink Thompson, and Gary Aguilar will take the next few days to review their options. So, guys, at least we have that. We can seek immediate release of Church Committee and HSCA documents, which I'm sure will be a treasure trove of interesting information for us all. Right, guys?
Oh, my gosh. I think, what you're suggesting is really important, because before they try to close the loophole on what they know is a rather sensitive set of documents, the research community has to force that and get a hold of them, because they're obviously, I'm sure, working right now to figure out how to close that hole. And, so I think that's a really critical thing, to do it and get a hold of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a great pivot on their point. Say, okay, well, you won't give us this shit, but hey, you forgot about this loophole over here, assholes. So we're going to be requesting all of this stuff.
Yeah. And the judge allows and the judge allowed it to go forward. So that's a good thing for us. So to Mr. Simpich, the Mary Farrell Foundation, Mr. Alcorn, Larry Schnapf, and all the people fighting the good fight, thank you from, I'm sure I speak on behalf of Mr. Jeff and Big Bad Bob. Well, guys, what do you think? We take a little promo break right here.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, guys. We will be back with Quick Hits episode number 46 with special guest Jeff Crudele right after this. Hey guys, Doug here with a special announcement. You know, this year, 2023, marks the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President John Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. And if you have never attended a JFK Assassination Research Conference, I would like to strongly urge you to do so this year. Enrich your understanding of the event and help mark this important point in time with JFK Lancer and Larry Hancock at JFK Lancer's November in Dallas conference for 2023, unveiling truth, honoring the 60th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's legacy. This conference will take place, guys, Friday, November 17th through Sunday, November 19th of this year in Dallas, Texas at the fantastic Lorenzo Hotel in downtown Dallas. This year's conference promises, as always, to be an informative and enlightening one, not to mention enjoyable. The conference itself is over 4 months away, guys, and already the announced list of speakers and presenters is amazing. Parenthetically, it includes 4 past guests of the Dallas action, and believe it or not, 1 Drop D podcast production co-host. Oh, yeah. Now, keep in mind, this list is incomplete, as more speakers and presenters will be announced between now and November, but already, guys, the stellar list of those presenting reads as follows. Of course, Larry Hancock, the author of, among other books, Someone Would Have Talked and Tipping Point. Bill Simpich, of course, the man. In my opinion, State Secret, his book, is the most analytically groundbreaking work on the Kennedy assassination in the last 15 years. Our friend Bart Camp with his new book, Prayer Man, More Than a Fuzzy Picture. Chuck Ocelli, the host of The Ocelli Effect. Jim Goshenar, Larry Schnapf, Stuart Wexler, Greg Doudna, Joe Borelli, Rob Big Bad Bob Clark of the Lone Gunman podcast and Quick Hits. Dear friend of the show, Monica Perez Jimenez, the daughter of assassination witness Marita Lorenz, along with names like Brent Holland, James Corbett, Johnny Cairns, Carmine Salvestano, Jeff Meek, and Robert Nelson. Again, that's only what's been announced so far, guys. Many more to come. Again, more speakers will be announced soon. Now, how do you attend? Well, there are a multitude of options. The first is in person. Get yourself on a plane and go to Dallas in November. Now, if you do that, in-person conference where you're sitting in the room with everybody, in-person conference attendance fee, $179.99. Now, if you go to the conference and you wish to download the presentations later, that's in-conference and digital download, $219.99. A student price, if you got a student ID, guys, $35. Pretty good deal. Now, if you're unable to get to Dallas and soak up all of this knowledge and research in person, there is a virtual option. Virtual conference only from the comfort of your own home via the World Wide Web, $70.99. Virtual conference and digital download capability, $124.99. Now, for all the information you need to purchase tickets, any kind of tickets you need, go to JFK Lancer Publications, all one word, .com. That's JFKLancerPublications.com. One more time, JFKLancerPublications.com. Please join us for the highly anticipated 27th Annual JFK Lancer November in Dallas Conference. as we commemorate the 60th anniversary of the death of John Kennedy, and we delve into the mysteries surrounding his untimely assassination. Again, JFKLancerPublications.com, JFKLancerPublications.com for your tickets, either in person or virtual, to the research event of 2023. We hope to see you there.
Big Bad Bob here with you for Silk City Hot Sauces. Why Silk City? Because this hot sauce comes to you directly from Paterson, New Jersey, also known as Silk City. These hot sauces are 100% natural, gluten-free, vegan, contain no chemicals, fillers, dyes, or junk. Everything is packed into recyclable glass containers because glass doesn't leach weird flavors into the product. All other hot sauces are sourced in small batches from locally bought fresh peppers. It's all about the pepper, people. I'm telling you. Your boy, Big Bad Bob, loves his food like he loves his women. Hot and spicy, but not so hot you can't eat them. So, if you love yourself some sauce and you're tired of trying to transform your bland meat into something edible, with the tip of a jar, you will transform your life forever. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com, place an order, and upon checkout, enter the code GUNMAN, that's GUNMAN, for 20% off of your entire order. You won't regret it. Thank me later. Peace.
Hey, Doug here. Got to let you guys know that an all-new issue of Garrison, the Journal of History and Deep Politics, has dropped in June of 2023, guys. That's right. From MidnightWriterNews.com. Writer with a W, W-R-I-T-E-R. MidnightWriterNews.com is issue number 013. And as usual, it is jam-packed with information regarding the historical study of deep politics. Lots of stuff that you and I love to read. Some of the contributing authors and subjects covered include, we got Richard Booth and Jose Gallison on the Oklahoma City bombing, Jonathan Cook on what Tucker Carlson's split with Fox News means, Caitlin Johnson on the American anti-war movement, and Ed Tatro on, of course, Lyndon Johnson. Plus, the late John Judge reprinted regarding the war in Afghanistan, S.T. Patrick on the old adage, quote, history repeats itself, unquote, and much, much more. That's issue number 013 of Garrison, the Journal of History and Deep Politics, from MidnightWriterNews.com. That's MidnightWriterNews.com. Order now. And welcome back to Quick Hits, episode number 46. I am Doug Campbell. With me is Big Bad Bob, Rob Clark, and our very special guest, Jeff Crudele. Mr. Jeff, as per our tradition, the guest is required to bring a discussion topic. The floor is yours, my man.
Well, I appreciate that. When we were talking earlier, it's something really came to mind for me about this. You know, all the people that are involved and engaged in this topic really heavily, I've sort of decided to bucket them in 3 subcategories. I think there are sort of the original investigators. There's the researchers, and then there's sort of a third group that I call the educators and writers and historians, and everybody who's involved in this in a big way does a little bit of each, but I think you can fall mostly in one category or the other. Of course, much of the investigation is over, and no one's really doing a lot of original investigating these days. There's not much to investigate, still some. So most people fall into the research category. I believe, at least for myself, that I fall into that third category. And I'd like to believe that the role, the mission of what we're doing on JFK, The Enduring Secret, is really an educational role.
I would add another word to that category is analyst. You said the investigation is, pretty much over. There's still people investigating, but I think a lot of those people, the historians, the writers, the researchers, the teachers, are like, and that's sort of what, some of us are great archivists. Some of us are better analysts, and that researcher analyst category, I think, is where I would put myself, like you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of analysis of research and investigation that's already gone on that we do, right?
You're not doing one function. You're, at any given point in time, you're having tactically to, sometimes reach back and maybe even still have, even today, an original discussion with somebody. Yeah. I got something from a reader, from a listener not too long ago, identifying somebody who was in the original honor guard that brought the casket in. It's still alive today and living in Iowa. And that's a follow-up for us. So, maybe there's still a little bit of, investigation that can still go on in moments. But my thing really is to storytell. After I got engaged in this, after I watched the movie, the JFK movie in the early 90s, and saw the Zapruder film, and like so many people, you begin to just read the books and you're fascinated by the topic. I say this on the podcast all the time. You can't write this stuff. I mean, if there was anybody writing a movie,
yeah,
my God, this is where fact is more interesting than fiction. And forget about the pursuit of truth for a moment, because that's obviously the higher thing in the hierarchy of what we're doing. But the story itself is just absolutely captivating.
Yeah, the stories, the stories within the story.
Yeah, that's right.
You could take somebody like Roy Hargraves, right? Yep. And his life alone could be a movie. It's a fascinating story, Yeah,
the characters they're endless. Like we did a series on Cuba, and Rip Robertson was one of the two Americans. Yeah. Now he's a guy. Now there's a guy that if you wanted to go off. And, it's funny because I live in the summertime, I live on a lake in North Carolina, and it's got a lot of fingers and I make the reference to, estuaries, like you can go down these little tiny paths of the assassination and just get totally lost in them, but you could always find your way back to the main part of the lake.
Man, you and I are of like mind, because I could talk with you about Rip Robertson for an entire day. And just be riveted to the conversation. I mean, that, and whether or not he may have been involved in the assassination, Yeah,
well, he was, and I'm sure you know way more about him than I do, because much of what I learned was relative to what went on during the Bay of Pigs invasion. But growing up in South Florida, where the Cuban community is so entrenched. And I was there. My parents moved there first in 46, went back to Ohio, came back in 62, and I was a year old. And so I grew up in the 60s and 70s there, and really, and then lived a good part of my life there before I moved north. And I'm back there now, actually, living in retirement. But I will tell you that the interesting living in that environment in South Florida at that time, and really understanding the plight of the Cuban people who were forced out of Cuba was a big thing for me. I went and did this big wander in the middle of these of our series, spent probably more time than I should have with the history of Cuba because of my own personal connection to it down there. I'll tell you, you guys will appreciate this. I'm going to tell you a funny little side story. I think I was 19 or so at the time. I think I was a first or second year college student. And I had a cousin on my mom's side who was a divinity student. and had come down and was going to the same college that I was. And he also, he was a really star athlete. He was a catcher on the baseball team, blah, blah, blah. But he was learning how to fly, and he had gotten his solo. And one day he said, "You want to go up with me?" And I said, "Sure." And I was into photography at the time. I had, an old Nikon FM, a manual camera, and I had these long telescopic lens that I placed on the camera. I had a lot of camera equipment, and we went up I went up with him for the first time, and it was a typical South Florida summer day where thunderstorms roll in very quickly. We got up there. He got a little unnerved by the storm that was rolling. He said, "I got to put the plane down." And I said, "Well, whatever. What do I know?" And so he puts this like Cessna, I don't know what it was, 152 or 170, something, one of those, down at the Opelika airport. And
that airport is steep in the legend of the people, places, things, events, and ideas surrounding the assassination of John Kennedy, is it not?
Yeah,
Wow.
you're gonna appreciate this. I had no appreciation for it as a 19-year-old, right? So we get down. He puts the plane safely down on the airstrip. We're at one end of it. We get out because it's really the weather is impending, but it wasn't raining at the moment. So we get out. We're outside on the edge of the wing of the airplane, and we're kind of bored, waiting for like what's next. And I see some people and cars down at the other end of the airstrip. And so I, just messing around, point my camera in that direction with this long telescopic lens on it. Well, it wasn't but a few seconds later where these guys got in their car. And when a car is very far away from you and it's speeding towards you, you can't really tell how fast it's going.
Right.
But as it began to approach us, you could tell the high rate of speed at which it was coming onto us. And these guys pull up, get out of the car, look at me and say, "Did you take any pictures with that camera?" And I said, "Well, no, sir, I didn't. I aimed it down your way, but I didn't take any pictures, and we're just waiting for the weather to improve."
Yeah.
And he looked at me and said, "If you point that camera in this direction again, I'm going to come down and smash it to pieces, and I'm going to take the film out of it." And I
bet he meant that 100%.
Oh, I'm sure he did. It was an amazing thing. We got into the plane and got out of there as quickly as we could. It was a crazy moment. I never understood it. But years later, in reading all of the material that we now have all read and are so well, understanding of, you realize you were probably you were obviously in the middle of something, mysterious and underhanded in some way. It could have been a CIA group. It might have been illicit. Could have been drugs. Could have been anything.
As they say in Tennessee, there was some shit going down somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And but there's a lot of that kind of stuff, and there was a lot of it that happened, right there in South Florida. Johnny Roselli and those guys spent time down there. Meyer Lansky had a really big operation in South Broward for a long time, years before that. But there was a presence there. It was Lauderdale was a place where a lot of the wise guys hung out. So there was a definite.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they had little homes and bungalows down there.
Yeah, they really did. And I, it was an interesting place to grow up. That was a wander. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that, but we try to my big thing is storytelling, to try to take the information that's out there. You guys will probably feel the same way. I've read so many books, and a lot of them are just, they're not very good at all, but there are many of them that are good. And, I mean, I'm sure you guys, you could spend a whole day. I think I have more than 200 books in the library.
Some are better than others. I'll say that. How about that? That's nice and diplomatic, right? Right, Rob?
Yeah, we lost Rob. So my thing has always been, how do you tell this story?
You had me at Opelika.
What was that?
Stupid me had my microphone muted, and I'm trying to talk like an idiot. I just said you had me at Opelika. I continue.
Yeah.
9 years we've been doing this, guys. 9 years. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
But the podcast medium I thought was a really great way to try to tell the whole story. And I think it's said best. I went to see Cyril Wecht not that long ago. I'd spent 6 years back in Pittsburgh. I was working there before I retired. And I got a chance through, I was in the hospital industry, so obviously a lot of connections to go see Cyril Wecht and all that. I went and saw him almost immediately when I got there. And I met him once again, not recently, about a year ago, I guess now, maybe sometime late last year. But it was really funny. I went to his offices. He's still practicing, actually, forensics. And his office is probably 3 blocks from where I had an apartment. And we get there, and he's got this big open, conference room. And we sit down there, and he says, and he's, can be a pretty gruff guy at times. And he said, what the hell are they teaching these kids in school? That one guy sat up on the 6th floor of the school book depository and fired 3 shots, and a lone gunman, a crazy man, killed the president. That's what they're telling them. And it's bullshit. And it was really funny. Obviously I can't deliver it like he does, but
we spent a night in a bar with Cyril Wecht.
Oh, he's just a crazy, he's a crazy, and when I say crazy, I mean, crazy, interesting and cool.
Charismatic.
He's very charismatic.
That was a big treat for me to meet him because, you saw him on TV when, I'm 52. So, that guy was somebody you recognized from television news reports and shit from the late 70s, at least I did. Yeah. And huge treat meeting. And he was the keynote speaker at an event Rob and I were at back in 2014, and very passionate, very lively, and he'll absolutely get you pumped up about this stuff. Let me say that.
Well, I think, man,
in a good way, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think, one of his most courageous moments was when, the HSCA completely sidestepped all the clear problems with the autopsy, and he became the lone dissenter on that group. And he was powerful enough to get his hour in front of the American people. And his soliloquy was absolutely stunningly spectacular. And of course, benchmarks for a very learned individual debunking the idea that the single bullet theory could actually be real. So you have this guy that is not necessarily advancing any of the technical forensics around it, but he's telling the story. And I when he said this to me about like what are future generations learning about this and why is it still important to them, I think it's really critical that we understand that it still is important. We don't know why power was wrestled away from Kennedy, and it was a very critical moment. And my God, the events that occurred afterward, as we all know, really pivoted the country. And so really, deeply getting to the bottom of it, deeply understanding it, and not and debunking all of the garbage. Because like I said, I'll read a book, and the book will be really good. Basis for it. And it's one of the reasons why the chaos has occurred in this realm of discussion. And what I'm trying to do, my core in all of this is to try to present as much as you can, as independently and objectively as you can, but clearly from time to time interjecting my own conclusions on things, because I think it is helpful for them to know, but without concluding in total about what may or may not have happened, because none of us really know. And but there's enough pieces. It's like putting together a puzzle. We were at the lake a couple weeks ago. We had family and friends in, and they it was a typical puzzle weekend, and there's a lot of puzzle pieces that got put in, and even when the puzzle's not complete, there's enough there to know exactly what it looks like. And we're approaching that, I think, in this whole discussion. And there's probably only a few critical things left to confirm what people already suspect today. And I think that's why everything that we're still doing to keep it going is important, because there has to be a legion of people. There has to be a public opinion that is strong enough to be able to continue to put the pressure on the appropriate places within the government to do this. And we have to do this responsibly. We cannot do this under the guise that this is being done because, we're anarchists or, we feel, I mean, I am very careful about my association with anything around this because, I love this country. I love it deeply. I believe in it. I believe in a republic. I believe in a democracy. And I believe that what we're doing is what responsible people would do in a democracy. And, we're not attempting to, to bring it to a point where it creates more havoc than it should. But we are trying to hold people accountable. I'm on a wander, so I'll stop. But I think we can't lose the significance of why are we still doing it? Why does this still matter? Why is it still important? Not just to guys my age, or guys your age, but the younger generation as well. And I hope we're getting more younger listeners. I don't get that demographic in my information on the podcast, but it's my hope. I get an email every once in a while. I had a guy the other day say, I listen to the podcast with my 8 and 9-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's spectacular.
I'll say this. Rob and I have had this conversation about that phenomenon, and it really is, at least on our side, just a cascade, a wave of younger listeners. Right, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I actually got put in touch with somebody. I was looking into something, for our Lancer presentation this year, and a friend of mine referred me to this other guy. So I'm talking to this other guy on the phone. Of course, I can't see him. Having this very adult conversation. I mean, not like pornographic or anything, but intellectually adult. Yeah. Conversation about the assassination. You know what I mean?
I like how he had to make that qualifier.
Well, you know how things tend to wander.
It's a statement on
my wander and Jeff's wanders are very different.
Well, it's a statement on society today, I guess. But it's like he's got to go. It was nothing inappropriate. God damn it! Don't get the.
Yeah, I did not have sexual relations with this boy. I'm telling you.
Now that's a sound. That's a sound bite that I'm going to definitely isolate. I promise. That's 100%.
All of a sudden, he drops the bomb. He's like, yeah, I'm only 13. I said, what? You're 13, and you have this kind of knowledge and interest in the assassination? He's like, yeah, I've only been researching for like 2 years though, and I'm like. But dude, you're sitting here and you have the gumption to, contact what I would consider to be big guns and relatively known people in the assassination, and have the, audacity to, hey, you mind if I interview you for the documentary I'm making? By the way, I'm only 13.
Oh, man. But I think it's fantastic because, I was 11 when I read my first book on the assassination. It was Best Evidence by David Lifton. I was 11.
Yeah.
But I checked it out 4 consecutive months from the library to get through it.
You read it 1 page at a time.
To absorb it. I mean, there was so much going back because occipital lobe and parietal whatever, art, all that stuff. But yeah, so that's very admirable. And I think that's amazing. That's amazingly cool because
it is amazing.
And the thing about it is, Jeff, you were talking about the podcast platform,
Yes.
the boomers aren't listening to podcasts so much as people in their teens and probably even younger. Much more, many more
even
young
funnier,
people.
This kid had no clue who I am or what I do. No clue.
Yeah, you're just researching.
Well,
he had no idea that have a podcast, any of that. He basically he was still on the, this guy wrote a book on, so I'm going to talk to him.
Yeah.
Type of level, but even so, just talking to this kid, it's like, as a podcaster, and I'm sure Jeff, you can relate, and Doug, you can relate. You always have that wonder in the back of your mind is, I know what the statistics say, but is anybody really fucking listening to this show? Like, I can't believe that, it's just hard for me to grasp that all these people listen to what I have to say. And it's amazing to me that you still run into people who've never heard of you, don't know what you're doing, willing to help, and interested in all kinds of things. Because I think a lot of the old guard of the assassination, these guys that were big in the 80s and 90s, they're very protective of their research. They don't like to share much. I mean, a big example, David Lifton. You've been writing this book for 30 years, okay? His Oswald book, not Best Evidence, but the book, The Final Charade, the one that never came out. So you spend all this time and you have all this research that you've accumulated over all these years of this stuff, and you don't share it with anybody, and now it's taken to the grave with you.
Yeah. Well, there are exceptions.
It's not just him either.
Yeah. Well, there are a few exceptions.
There are exceptions.
To that. Like Walt Brown is a good example of somebody who, when I first contacted him, was and has remained to this day super gracious and a friend. I call him Uncle
Walt. There's always exceptions to the rule.
But
for the most part, these guys in the 80s and 90s that wrote books, I won't mention any names. They live in Burbank. Are very protective of their research and maintaining this one theory of thinking throughout the ages, even though it's been debunked 4 ways from Sunday. But it's stuff like that, and then you get this new breath of life into everything. Because like I've told on the show before, I went to the Lancer conference in 2019, and it's like a funeral home. I was the youngest guy there. Everybody else is half dead, gray haired, got their tweed suit jackets on with their velvet elbows and shit, just sitting there falling asleep. And
hey, I'm gonna.
Are you fucking serious?
I'm gonna hold off on getting. I'm gonna hold off on getting those things made, Rob, because after that you may not be doing that.
Well,
no, it's all good, Doug. It's all good.
Okay.
I think there's a big. I think there's a big pivot. 90% or more of the listening of a podcast, or at least my podcast, I think generally it's true, is on a phone. And people are freed. They're mobile. They can do now whatever. They can multitask whatever they want to do. They can sit on their their tractor and cut their lawn. They can walk their dog. They can do the laundry. They can just sit and listen. And I think that the mobility that a podcast provides, that venue today, is really quite different. It really gives a flexibility of, and that's why people binge. And I think we're in a really unique position. I mean, you guys are pioneers. I've used a lot of terms today, but I think among others, you're pioneers in what you're doing. You've been doing it for a very long time, and you've shown the way for others to do it. And certainly there's going to be more, but I think, that's why, and I haven't even really gotten to what I was going to talk about today, but that was really the Garrison investigation, because I think historically that was so significant. And I would like to talk a little bit about that. I know, and I'm sure I'm going to wander on, and I'm sure you guys will cut out what doesn't make sense, but we don't edit shit, buddy.
Warts and all.
Well, if you guys don't mind, maybe I'll pivot a little bit and I'll talk about it, because I think, we have
jump right in.
Let me make
All
a
right,
note.
well,
Let me make a note right here. Rob has warts. Okay,
Not
go
the
ahead.
genital kind, just kind of on your finger.
Guys, I try to produce our episodes in some logical order, based on subject. And as you guys know, I do a lot of wandering. But right now I'm at the tail end of our Garrison investigation set. So I think we have about 25 or 26 episodes already. I think we started at episode 151. I'm up to 177, I think now. So, because it's fresh, I thought I would talk about it a bit today. As I said, I believe it's quite historically significant. And it's another one of those examples where you just can't make this stuff up. I mean, there's the stuff that was there is obviously the stuff that they made a movie out of, but Garrison himself, he was such a giant figure, both literally and figuratively in the lore and the whole tale of the JFK assassination. He was a really big.
Can you imagine a very well done and intelligently done and objectively done, say, 15-episode run of a limited series on the Garrison investigation? Can you imagine if it was intelligently done? What a story! What a story! There's thousands of little stories in that story.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite elements of the whole Kennedy assassination lore is New Orleans, man. You cannot write these characters; they write themselves. And the intrigue and the connections, it's just fascinating. I can't wait to hear what you get into.
Yeah, man.
Well, you guys are spot on. I mean, we all feel the same way about it. I mean, it's almost like going on vacation. When you're the equivalent of going on vacation when you're reading through things that relate to the assassination. It really starts with him though, with Garrison. He was a really big and physically imposing guy. I think he stood almost 6 feet 7 inches tall, and he had a real presence in a room. And he spoke with that deep sort of baritone voice. You knew he was there, and you knew what kind of imposition he probably had on people when he was around them. He was undoubtedly controversial. And look, nobody's perfect. Everyone has flaws. No doubt he had his. Maybe some of them really, fatal. But there's no doubt that there's a good side of him too. There was light and dark. We all know that no matter who waded into this, the investigation of anything after the Warren Commission was completed would have been a lightning rod. And it was in this case too. It had an element of danger to it almost from the get-go. Again, as you might expect, people, I think, first tried to tear the investigation apart. And then secondly, they tried to tear Garrison apart as well, and as a way to get at the investigation. And, he was the subject of a lot of talk. He was instantly a national, really an international celebrity. He got called a lot of things. And, he had supporters and detractors, as you might expect. And I think it's really one of the more difficult areas to separate truth from fiction. It's funny. I think, whether you're a supporter or a detractor of Garrison's, I think the funny thing about it, I'll call it a commonality between both sides of the equation, is so many people refer to him as the Jolly Green Giant. It was kind of both a loving and an unloving term in those days. It didn't matter what side you're on. You said it lovingly if you loved Jim Garrison, and you said it very derisively if you weren't. And does anybody remember the canned vegetable jingle that came from? I mean, I think we're old enough to remember that. If you got younger people, they may not remember where that came from.
Oh yeah, the Jolly Green Giant. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and there's such, as you guys know, there's such polarized views of all these pockets of evidence. But to me, there's no more polarization evident than really in two places. You can take the autopsy, which I think is tops in that sort of category of things. And then the second being the Garrison investigation. I think in some ways the investigation itself may have been a proxy for what really is a deep divide that exists between, maybe what you call lone gunman proponents and then the conspiracy theorists. The lone gunman proponents point to the flaws in his case. and the immediate dismissal of the charges. They were the jury deliberated for only 1 hour, if you can believe it, less than 1 hour. I think it was 55 minutes before they came to a decision. The divisions within Garrison's own team were an issue too, on whether Clay Shaw should have been charged or not, and the controversy around using Perry Russo, and the controversy surrounding his testimony, and whether he was a highly suggestible witness that received probably what was a lot of suggestions. The rather shoddy old school investigative techniques that they applied, perhaps just because they were in New Orleans, and it was a certain day and age and time, and they were there locally and they thought they could get away with it. Like some of that seen in the details, for instance, if you guys recall the alleged bribery attempt of Al Bobuff. Of course, they didn't realize, or the one investigator didn't realize that, he was being taped at the time. And, but they got out of it because, they were right at the pivot of, because back then you could actually provide remuneration to witnesses. And so they actually skated the charge and got out of it. And, perhaps some of it was fueled by Garrison's own sort of righteous indignation when the forces that were against him began to play dirty pool. His office was bugged. His house phone was bugged. He had infiltrators on his own staff. One of them gave away the witness list to the other side. Back then, under state law in Louisiana, the DA's office wasn't required to give the witness list to the defendant. And, he had a guy in his office hand it over. So, some of these folks had CIA connections, as you all know, other from not so friendly places. Guys like Jim Phelan, the Saturday Evening Post, who really torpedoed Russo's testimony. He didn't know, people were coming out of the woodwork. He didn't know, who was friend or foe. The other thing which comes up a lot when you talk about Garrison was, if you're a detractor, all of them alleged he had a real thirst for power. And he was so charming that was kind of disarming. And, it was an absolutely known fact that he had aspirations to be a senator in the old great state of Louisiana. And, really, honestly, if things had gone right, maybe he would have attempted to have been a president someday. Who knows? There's no doubt he had significant political aspirations. But I think his political aspirations, are a great example of how each sort of camp can take a basic fact and kind of look at it as either, apple pie or the devil. If you're a Garrison detractor, you think he was motivated by his own personal aspirations, his own greed, and he was willing to destroy at least one man's life, Clay Shaw, in pursuit of that. Everything was about the publicity and what that publicity could do for his political career. But, if you're a Garrison supporter, you believe that the power he possessed was really the very reason that, and I'll put it in his terms, that one chicken shit DA thought he alone, could beat the entirety of the federal government and the national security apparatus of this country. It's interesting. And, and maybe perhaps some ancillary elements too, including the mob, although he was accused of looking the other way, which is really not true when you look at the details. But, I think in the end of the day, despite all of that, he really wanted to bring justice and truth to the Kennedy assassination. I really do believe that. And I think he had a genuine desire to seek the truth in the case. I think he really did love this country. And, setting aside any personal aggrandizement that would have naturally come his way or anyone's way to anyone who would have waded into this thing and won. But I think he was in it to seek the truth. I think he was in it for the right reasons.
I do too. Yeah. You said wading in. I've always liked the analogy of he was like, blood in the water, and he attracted a lot of sharks, and as a result, trusted some of the wrong people.
Oh, he really did. There are many examples of that. His relationship with Bill Gervich, which was terrible. His decision to get rid of Frank Klein, in favor of purging Gervais.
He hired, I think it was Steve Wilson, Jerry Hemming, and Roy Hargraves as investigators, along with Bernardo de Torres, which, wow, wow.
Yeah, I mean, he did. He made some really critical mistakes in a lot of this, and I think part of it was the public pressure that happened. When I got ready to do this, there are a handful of books that tell the whole story about the Garrison investigation. And it's interesting because they all, in my opinion, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast, fall into one of these camps or the other. I mean, like they're either a detractor or they're a supporter. And it's really probably for me, more than anything, when you're reading all the literature on these topics, it's really astounding to read about one topic or another of the Garrison investigation in one of these books, one of these core books. And then you put it down and you read about the same topic in one of the opposing books. And honestly, when you're done, you wonder if the two books were even talking about the same topic or event. On the podcast, I call it the slog, wading through opposing narratives, to get to the real facts, and find the truth. And,
well, if they're slanted one way or another, if they're of the belief that there was no conspiracy to commit the president, then that automatically skews their view on the Garrison investigation. They're going to see it one way, and that's just the way it is. I mean, if you're open to a possibility of a conspiracy, then you're going to view the Garrison investigation as something totally different.
Yeah.
And you even see that to this day, we have people very accusatory of the Garrison investigation. A guy who I have on my show pretty often, Fred Litwin, he's very critical of Jim Garrison and what he was doing down there still to this day. So you're never going to get away from it.
You have this core of people who really, obviously they're experts, or they're the experts on what happened down there, at least from a publication standpoint. Patricia Lambert, who did False Witness, and she's definitely a Garrison detractor. You have James Kirkwood, who did, American Grotesque. Some people say he had some connections to the CIA. You have Joan Mellon, who did A Farewell to Justice, who obviously is a Garrison supporter. You have William Davies with his book, who's a Garrison supporter. You have another guy. I don't know. Have you guys read the book? I think I have it here. It's called The Garrison Case, A Study in the Abuse of Power. It's by a guy named Milton Brenner, who actually represented some of the witnesses.
I have never heard of this book. Rob?
Yeah, it's out of print. It's an old book. It's called The Garrison Case, A Study in the Abuse of Power, and it's by Milton Brenner, who was actually an attorney who represented many of them, including Alvin Bobuff and others. And obviously it's anti-Garrison. But all of these you get them all together and you go to the point in each one of these books that talks about a particular event, and it's absolutely stunning the narrative differences pro and anti-Garrison. So a lot of it's error of omission, where they'll leave out something that's highly celebrated, a very public element of the trial, probably in testimony or elsewhere, and it's just gone if it doesn't support their version of the narrative. And so you really have to. It's a great example if you're trying to present the case or present the circumstances in context of the time and you weren't there.
Well, yeah, we call that cherry picking. And both sides do it now, to be fair. But
you know what? I do it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, we all do it. We all do it.
Yeah.
Some are more defensive about it than others,
Yeah, I mean, we all find ourselves with our personal biases, especially this far into it when you see so much. But you got, but I will say, even listening to you all about topics, you're almost always talking about how you might look at it from one angle or another and not just one. And I think, I found myself getting more biased as we went through the first 175 episodes from where I was in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to pull myself back a little bit, because I think as a listener, what I've gotten a lot of feedback on is we really like the fact that you're trying to be objective about it. I don't go at it. There are some out there that, go at it in what I would call the legal way of presenting the evidence, and I don't particularly like that, because I think it's, while it's highly analytical, it doesn't put things in context. And I think that's when you're investigating something that, the truth is somewhat underneath the covers, you can't just look at it like a lawyer would. I think that was where the Warren Commission really fell down. Aside from the politics of it. But, to be truthful, there are only a handful of jurisdictions. Here's the interesting thing about this. There are only a handful of jurisdictions in the country where it was likely that an investigation of the president's murder could have been initiated, if you think about it. Remember, as we all know, you guys know well, it was not a federal crime on November 22nd, 1963 to kill the president, right? It was a state crime. It was a capital crime of murder.
Right, and Dallas decided to go as far as they decided to go. So,
Well, and they were pressured. Let's face it. They had clear jurisdiction, and it was wrestled away from them by the powers that be.
Right.
Now, but here's the interesting thing about it is that, criminal conspiracy, which is a pretty low threshold in if you look at the way laws are written in most states, almost anywhere there was somebody who had knowledge of the plot and was engaged in somehow aiding and abetting it, there could have been a criminal conspiracy charge put forth. Obviously the first one's in Dallas, where the murder took place itself. Where the murder charges could have been filed. But there are obviously lots of other places where conspiratorial acts may have taken place and could have been charged. The more likely venues for that were obviously Miami and New Orleans. Miami, of course, because of the deep Cuban community and everything that was going on down there. And I suppose it was possible to add Tampa and Chicago, given the plots that potentially were planned for those cities. And I'm sure perhaps conspiratorial acts occurring in other places. Who knows? L.A., with Roselli, who knows? But we know that New Orleans and Miami were the most plausible. And if you think about it, you had Henry Wade in Dallas, and then you had Richard Gerstein in Miami, in Dade County, where Miami is located. Again, jurisdictions got to be present before anybody can do anything. So there was only a handful of people that could. And first off, Henry Wade in Dallas was no Jim Garrison. This was a man that was going to lay low in the shadows at all costs, I think. And all he had to do was prosecute the layup that he got related to putting Ruby away. So, he was not going to wait into, he and others in Dallas, they got their marching orders early, I think, from the feds right after the assassination. And Wade was just not a man who would have ventured off into the darkness of the assassination under any conditions, I think. Now, Richard Gerstein is interesting. He was a tough and he was a very well-respected DA in Miami, and he supported Garrison. Have you guys heard the clip that's out there, the story that Larry King tells about the money that got funneled from Gerstein to Garrison through King in order to help pursue the investigation?
No.
That's a great story. Oh, it's a great story. It's actually at the tail end. If you guys get a chance, it's at the tail end of my episode 151, the opening episode of the Garrison trial. And you guys will find it interesting. But Larry King was involved in the middle of it. And actually, in the end, ironically, it caused him some heartburn. So it's a great story, and he tells it, and it's at the end of that. And I'll leave that for folks to listen to. But let's face it, Gerstein had his hands full with the Cubans in Miami, they were all at the epicenter of that cauldron that, was Miami at that moment, and everything that was going on down on the University of Miami campus, the JM Wave stuff. He was shadowboxing, I think, really with the Cubans who lay underneath the covers, so to speak, and what was, most assuredly a really unsavory web of deception, so to speak, that I think had come about all over Miami at that time, and you could feel it. Even when I was growing up years later, you could feel it. And I'm sure it was all a result of the history of the Bay of Pigs. It was a tough place to be. If it was not a part of the country that loved Kennedy at that moment, and all the things that went on along the Florida coast, I mean, they really had their hands full, in the coves of the Keys and in the safe houses in South Miami. And, like I said, at JM Wave, you talk about, you guys talk about making movies. They can make movies out of that stuff for years to come. Man. It's infamous,
What a great series that would make. Just JM Wave, the JM Wave Secret Cuban War,
Yeah. If you got, it's funny. I spent a lot of time in Miami, even though I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you guys have ever been down on the, that South Miami area and around that campus. I found it fascinating that they put that there actually on the campuses. They own a lot of property down there, so it's not surprising. But it's a private institution. It's not part of the public educational system in Florida, so that kind of made sense, right? I mean, everything they did could be closely, there was no sort of conflicting disclosure issues or the politics of a state-run organization. Very interesting. But the whole thing really left Garrison, in my mind, to be the man of courage to pursue the investigation. And I think, you really would have. I don't think people really understood what a live wire starting something like this was. By the time it all began to heat up, in '66 or '67, the Vietnam War, right?
What a volatile climate to do this thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, we tend to think of it in sort of the, I don't worry about the CIA knocking on my door today. I don't, worry about the FBI knocking on my door today about this kind of stuff. Can you imagine, what it was like for them back in '66 or '67? We chronicled the CIA memo. You guys, I think, have read it on your show too. That one that was widely distributed internally within the CIA at the time. It was early 1967, right after his investigation broke. And it was an overt frontal thrust, to derail the investigation. It was almost like it was a press kit that was to be sent out and utilized across both local and domestic media outlets and international outlets to ensure that the story didn't matriculate in the wrong way in the news media across the world. It's unbelievable, actually. How overt it was, and it's a great memo. But to this day, it's really the same question when it comes to the obstruction that the CIA projects on the topic. Like, why? To protect the cover of Clay Shaw, highly unlikely. And for this whole thing, there was no doubt that it was life-changing for Shaw, for sure. And for Garrison too. I think at moments for Garrison, it was inevitably life-threatening. Again, it was 1967, and I think there was, there's more there that meets the eye. Years later, you got to ask yourself this, because whether you're a detractor or a supporter, you ask yourself, like, why did Garrison really do it? Why did he take the leap? They asked him years later whether he would do it all over again. And he said, with a very, very frank and a very direct response, no. He said that the personal price he had paid was just too high. And I thought that was really telling in sort of the historical perspective of it. But if there's one thing that happened for sure, it made him one of the most recognizable faces on the planet after NBC and Walter Sheridan tried to dismantle the investigation, by doing the white paper special that appeared on NBC television. It was an attempt to derail the investigation, and it was, as you guys recall, it was a real smear job. And, luckily back in the day, the FTC fairness doctrine was in place, and it allowed Garrison to sue, and not sue, but to obtain prime time on Saturday night national television, rebuttal time. As I recall, NBC used an hour to air the original show, and Garrison only got 30 minutes for his rebuttal.
Yeah.
But remember that?
Yeah.
And but the entire nation, and really indeed folks around the world got to hear a courageous man state that an element of the CIA probably killed John Kennedy, and that Lee Harvey Oswald never fired, that rifle that day, and he was just a patsy. A lot of people would judge that NBC special to be quite damaging to Garrison. Maybe so.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think he chose to tell the story, the big picture story of what really had happened. And even though he didn't have all the facts, of it.
Well, even then, the minutia, he didn't have all the minutia to get into, and certainly didn't have time to get into any minutia, because when that happened, he was still very much in the midst of his investigation, right?
Yeah, he was totally he was totally ahead of himself, but he made a really crucial decision around that 30-minute broadcast. As you recall, he got it because the NBC special had literally, made dubious claims about he and his office made by some of the prisoners, that ostensibly the original concept was he would get on and refute the claim. But when he only got 30 minutes rather than an hour, he realized that, it was a terrible PR approach to try to deal with these rather chicken shit claims, and that he had a better approach. And this was one of the places where he was strategically brilliant. What he did was, go high instead of go low, and he appealed, to the core of the American people about, democracy and what was right or wrong. And then afterward, he took those same prisoners, and he tried to do it to Walter Sheridan too. And he dragged them in front of the Orleans grand jury, where many of them had to take the Fifth Amendment to, when he was asked them to account for what they had falsely stated on that NBC special. So, in the end, I think his rebuttal did more to appeal to the better soul of Americans than, people give him credit for. He did more that night, I think, than anyone has ever done in a 30-minute stretch. He did more that night to dispel the idea that a lone gunman killed President Kennedy.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, of course, he was a showman, as you guys know. He did much of the same. Have you guys read his Playboy magazine interview?
Hey, he was the quintessential.
I looked at the pictures.
Public figure. He was.
I used to. That's. I remember as
Lots
a
of
kid,
bush.
I got sort of outed. My dad had a subscription, and I got outed reading one by my sister-in-law. And I looked at her and said, "Well, I only read the articles." And to this day, it's kind of a funny inside joke in the family.
Wait, Playboy had articles?
Yeah,
Right.
it had really good cartoons, by the way. There's some of those I
Annie
still remember
Fanny?
watching.
Was there?
Yeah.
There was one called Annie Fanny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve Vai had a guitar that had Annie Fanny cartoons plastered all over it. That was pretty cool. But
good
anyway,
stuff.
where were we? How did we get off on?
Well, we were talking about him being a filmman, and he did other stuff too, right? He appeared on the Tonight Show where he got into a really interesting argument. You know who got him on that show? Mort Saul.
I can believe that.
That's a tragic story, actually. The whole thing was, he was a guy on top of his career, and his career was essentially, taken from him as a result of that. He couldn't get on anything. Terrible. And I think it's a great example of where his bravado caught up with him. I think he was, he had an ego element to it, and he said some things on these shows and in the public that, if you were a press secretary, you just curl your toes. But it brings us, the whole thing about that really, to me, it kind of boils to the top when you talk about Walter Sheridan. He was a close confidant and operative of Robert Kennedy. as you guys know. He later went on to work for NBC, and he produced the NBC white paper regarding the Garrison investigation itself. These guys were colleagues from the Justice Department. And honestly, if it were not for Sheridan, Kennedy might not have taken Hoffa down. So, you have to give him credit for that. But this guy Sheridan was no Boy Scout. In fact, I think he was a bad dude, in my opinion. And but here he was, after the Hoffa affair.
That's man. It's like, why would Bobby Kennedy do this? So it's very interesting. That's a whole other rabbit hole to go down, that Walter Sheridan dynamic and what was really going on there.
Oh, it is absolutely one of the enduring secrets. He found himself in New Orleans taking down a DA in his investigation, and as you just said, for God's sake, why?
Yeah.
But I think it goes. I think it goes to the darker side of, number one, who Sheridan was, and the darker secrets of why Robert Kennedy refused to support Garrison's investigation. I mean, why would you? Your brother's killed. The warrant report is not right, and you're publicly espousing that because that's the only thing you can do. But you get this reconnaissance back from Sheridan, and you make this decision, not to engage. And he chose in the end. Bill Gurvich actually flew up north and actually met privately with Kennedy for a few moments and basically said he's got nothing. So he was not only hearing from people like Sheridan, but he was hearing from people who ostensibly had credibility in the local community like Gurvich. And so he in the end, Kennedy chose to hurt and not help the Garrison investigation. And it's sad, actually, because I think had it gone the other way, things might have been different. There were other factors too. I think, unfortunately, the timing of the investigation relative to the political cycle, it was not good. It was 1967, and as the presidential campaign seasons were really right around the corner, and really Bobby Kennedy thought the only legitimate way to uncover the truth about his brother's murder was to get back to the White House and get hold of the presidency. I don't think there's any debate about that. And I think he also knew that Garrison was erratic, and he couldn't, Kennedy couldn't control the outcome of the narrative. And I don't think, I think Patricia Lambert, as I recall, in her book, has a delineation of all the different theories that Garrison publicly espoused over a relatively short time about who was involved in it. And when they're all put in one paragraph or two and you read them, you can tell why people thought he was just completely, erratic. And because it was sort of like the theory of the day. And what he should have done is just been quiet about it, but he just couldn't do that. He was that was not his DNA to do it. And I think, Bobby probably thought, what if Garrison somehow connected Bobby's, tough stance on the mob or the assassination attempts on Castro to the ultimate actions taken by his brother? What if they were true and it came out as part of the Garrison investigation? Would Bobby be criticized publicly? How would that hurt his chances of being president? I think things were complicated, and there's much more to the backstory of that. And I'm actually going to cover that in an upcoming JFK Enduring Secret episode, so stay tuned. But suffice it to say, I think really in general it remains an enduring secret. I've got a good friend who's actually has some friendship connection to the Kennedy family, and I hope
wow.
I think at some point I hope that the family itself will open up some of the records that that they have at the library. Who knows? You never know. But I think there are probably things in there which might shed more light on these particular things. I mean, that's speculation.
The William Manchester interviews. Yeah.
I think that those alone, if those could ever be loosened, I think would be very helpful historically.
100%.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, it's sad. I mean, it's sad that, when Bobby knew full well that the truth of the matter just could not be found in the Warren report. It's sad that, there wasn't a carpe diem moment to try to use him as an instrument of truth, instead he torpedoed the whole thing. And so what happened was, by the time the prosecution got to trial, there just wasn't a whole lot there to present.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, at least I should qualify that. At least when it came to the New Orleans conspiracy part of it,
when it came to Clay
again,
Shaw, he had a much better and much better case and a much. I'm not going to say direct link, but a more direct link maybe to the conspiracy with David Ferry. But then David Ferry died, and what he had left was Clay Shaw, and that's kind of what I feel like the Clay Shaw prosecution was, the Hail Mary pass, because he lost. He lost Ferry.
Absolutely,
yeah.
It was absolutely that. Absolutely.
All right, man, Jeff, thank you so much, buddy. And that's. You said that's on an upcoming, the William Sheridan thing. Walter Sheridan is on an upcoming episode of The Enduring Secret.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yep. Well, are we good for time? You want me to continue a little bit, or what are we doing? Because I know you guys have, there's more to cover, and I don't want to. I can wander forever on this topic. I have a lot. I have a lot I can say.
We're actually about to get up against some time, Jeff, I believe. Probably need to move to the email segment at this point, don't we, Rob?
Yes, sir. We got a couple. Today in the bag.
Well, throw them up at me. Yeah, Mr. Jeff, we got we're on the 3-hour time clock with Spreaker. Sometimes it gets pretty irritating. We do apologize.
And this is the best part of the show coming up here.
Says Rob. All right, here we go. Emails. I think we should just ditch these emails and let Jeff continue on about the Garrison investigation. Come on, man.
Well, there's a lot of good parts people might want to hear Jeff comment on in these emails.
Okay.
You guys can have me back. I'll finish my craziness about that, because I really think the Garrison thing is just so important, and there is so much to say about it. Or maybe I can coax you guys to come on with me. That would be good too. I just love that. Whatever you guys.
Hey, it's a close. It's a closed circle, but once you're in the circle, it's an open door policy. So anytime, buddy.
Yeah, and if people love what Jeff has to say, he has his own podcast, folks. 100 and how many episodes? 75.
That's right, yeah. And no rednecks to interrupt him.
Oh,
that's
listen, right. You guys, I got to tell you, this is so much fun. I'm having a ball today, and I will say this, that everything I was going to say, for the most part, except for the couple episodes that are left, and that's one of them that we just talked about. It's all already out there on the Garrison investigation. There's 25 of them. There's probably going to be another 5 to 7 more, but much of it's already there.
Yeah, here's a hint. I knew about the Larry King Association because I listened to Jeff's show. So there you go, people. How about that? How about that? All right, first email.
151, Doug. Just listen to the first one.
I've already wrote that down.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, our first email today is from Alan Dullass. Okay.
What?
Alan says, yes.
Even Bart thought that was funny.
Alan says, hey there. Hey now. RFK Jr., has come out and declared the CIA responsible for the deaths of his father and uncle. Can we be sure that Lisa Pease and Jim DiEugenio will vote for him in the Democratic primary? Will Jim be wearing the sweatpants to the rallies? Best wishes, Alan Dullass.
Well, man, it took a while, didn't it, for Robert Kennedy Jr. to come up on this show? It took a while.
Yeah.
What was his question again, Rob?
He's wondering if Jim DiEugenio and Lisa Pease are going to vote for RFK Jr. I think that's a safe bet.
I think that's a safe bet, yeah. I think that's an absolute safe bet.
Yeah. And will Jim wear his sweatpants to the rallies? You goddamn right he will.
Hey.
And his Velcro shoes.
Have you guys seen any of these RFK rallies?
No.
You haven't?
No.
I've actually got he captivates his audience. I've actually got a little bit of audio from one, a very recent one. Let's listen.
Bob Dylan said one time, he said to me, Bobby D said, you know, sometime life is a drag, sometime life is a bust, but we all got to do what we must. We got to keep on, keeping on, baby. And now then, we gonna start keeping on. My brother's gonna kick some booty this summer, baby.
Hey, he's got the crowd in the palm of his hand there. Robert Kennedy does. That's pretty impressive.
He's a hell of a public speaker.
Hell of a public speaker, man. Very inspiring. So I can see those people voting for him. Absolutely.
Strong voice, doesn't need a microphone.
No,
Rest
very
in
captivating.
peace, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
God. All right, next up, we have an email from Jenna. We have an email from Jenna Talia. Howdy, boys.
Are you sure you guys aren't writing these to yourself?
No, we do. I swear to God, we do not write these.
What was that name? What was that name again?
Jenna Talia.
Oh, my goodness.
They even have their own email address, jenna.talia@myyahoo.com. I mean, you can't make this shit up.
They have their own email address.
Yeah. So, Jenna, prepare yourself for some emails, honey.
Oh, boy.
Howdy, boys. I was
Howdy.
pondering the other day over all the researchers into the JFK assassination and their contributions to the field. There have been many great people over the years who have helped shed light on these murky waters. But what do you think? I know it's difficult to narrow down, but who would you judge to have made the greatest contribution to our knowledge over the years? Also, Rob, can you settle an argument I've been having with my friend Connie Lingus? Your sack, is it the rough and ready texture of burlap or more the silky smooth feeling of velvet? Many thanks. Jenna, with a kiss. Okay. Well, to answer the second part of your email first, silky smooth feeling of velvet, Jenna. Thanks to my manscaper.
It's a Kubota manscaper.
So let's all go around the horn here. Who do you think, Doug, has made the greatest contribution to the JFK knowledge base over the years?
Oh, boy.
That's so many of them.
You know,
you got to pick one, just one.
Maybe
greatest researcher ever.
Oh man, wow! But are we going with smartest analyst? Or are we going with someone who put the most number of records in like what? Is it Weisberg because of his archive, because of the knowledge base that's there?
I think that's your own personal feeling. I mean, whatever you want to attribute it to.
I'm going to have to come back with an answer on the next episode. That's a hell of a question to ponder. I mean, really. I mean, you could even make the case for Garrison because of the avenues of research that were opened because of his investigation. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh wow, what a it's a hard question to answer, Jenna.
Yeah, Jeff, do you have an answer, or is this something you need to contemplate?
I can't pick one, but there are so many good ones. I mean, like in the early days, I mean, there were people like Sylvia Maurer, who wrote Accessories After the Fact. You got to give credit to Mark Lane right from the very beginning, whether you agree or don't agree with all of the stuff that he did. People have done some great work. I think, people say there's a lot of stuff. I mean, if RFK were here right now, he'd point to Douglas and his JFK, the Unspeakable. Honestly, I don't agree with what.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Like look at Noel Twyman's book, Bloody Treason. There were a lot of things that, again, avenues that were later explored by other researchers that were opened up because of that research specifically. But what a hard thing to
And you can even
quantify.
throw Oliver Stone into the mix for all of the, attention he brought back to the case.
Hey, the guy, right. I mean, that effort, that project, the movie was responsible for the ARRB. I mean, really, and the JFK Records Act. So,
That's right,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Hard to quantify, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's an
it's so
excellent
many.
question, Jenna.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you guys this will be controversial with you all, and I don't agree with his theory on it, but you got to give some credit to people like Vincent Bugliosi. I mean, you can't have 2,600 pages and not have it have some reasonably good reference material on it, even though you don't like what he concludes on it, and it's probably wrong. There's a lot of great references, for information that's evidential and factual.
Well, again, back to archives. I'm not into this Harvey and Lee thing. I don't believe it. I don't believe it was anything close to reality. But the John Armstrong archives, is an absolutely.
You got to throw Malcolm Blunt into the equation.
But the Armstrong archives are insane. All of those notebooks that you could just read his research notebooks, and it's the stuff that's in there is amazing. So I don't know. Like I say, Jenna, that's a very good question, and let us think about that, and maybe we'll return with a segment in a future episode on this subject.
All right, next up we got Peter Maurice. Dear Doug, I think this is a question for you, bud.
All right. Lay it on me.
He says, I don't have social media. Well, what the fuck is wrong with you, Peter? I'm hoping for an update on Ted Rubenstein. I've been listening to Vintage Dave Emery from Pacifica Archives, and he's thanking Ted all over the place. Then I pick up a book on Iran-Contra Connection by Jonathan Marshall, Peter Dale Scott, and Jane Hunter, and they thank him in there too. This guy's a legend.
He's a legend, and
anyway,
he's a badass.
I hope he's okay.
I have.
So, Doug, do you have an update?
Yes. Number one, thank you very much. Who was the Peter? Peter, thanks for the email, and thanks for concern for our mutual friend. You're right. Legend, badass. Total legend, badass. He is doing better. He had a little health scare, a little health issue, spent some time in the hospital. I have been on the phone with him within the last 14 days. Talking research. He sounds he's 100% strong. Sounded like to me. So Ted's doing good.
Good.
Doing good. And I told him that or he heard the last episode, Rob, where we were wishing him well, and he wanted me to thank everybody for the well wishes. So Ted's doing good. Rocking and rolling.
Well, continued healthful success to Ted. Yes.
It's probably about 10 days ago, brief conversation on the phone. He couldn't talk, but I do know he's got a new phone and he's having a hard time figuring it out. So there you go.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have a dial on the face of it, so I understand. Okay.
It's not hanging on the wall in the parlor.
We have an email from ZR Bush.
ZR Bush.
Good day, gentlemen.
ZR Magnum Dong here.
Yes. ZR Taint here.
Yeah.
Good day, gentlemen. I hear a lot about the supposed involvement of LBJ in the assassination. It always seems to me this is a lot of speculation and hearsay and not much substance or fact. It seems to boil down to that he wanted to be president, so he must have been involved. It all seems very shaky to me. What say you? Also, when taken in for questioning by the Dallas police, do you think Marina was DPD'd by the DPD? If so, that could be a good subject for the Lone Nut podcast. Best wishes from out here on the steps, ZR Bush.
ZR Bush.
Probably ask Wesley Liebler about that before he asked the DPD.
Yes, right. I've heard that story. Absolutely.
Yeah.
LBJ. Well, you can't be in the, you can't research the JFK assassination without knowing about the LBJ as mastermind wing, and I'm fully aware, 100%.
But it's bullcrap.
And that's about all I've got to say about that.
Yep, agreed. Don't think we put very much credence to that. There are some interesting tidbits here and there, most of which have been debunked along the way.
Yep.
And yeah, sad to say, a lot of smoke, no fire.
No
A lot
fire.
of smoke, no fire. All right. Oh my God, Doug, we have not heard from this person in so long.
Who?
We have an email next up from Tim, the eugenicist sweatpants.
Well, welcome back, Tim. We were wondering what happened to you, buddy.
Yeah, we thought you sadly passed away.
We didn't know if COVID got you or gout.
Yeah. He says, well, yeehaw, boys. I'm back, and this time it's personal. I took some time off to try to lose those last stubborn 150 pounds at the health spa. On the one hand, it was a bit disappointing because I didn't manage to do that.
So
on the other hand, the fact that on the other hand, there's the fact that my quintuple XL sweatpants still fit snugly around my middle. Helped, of course, by the stretchy elastic waistband. Now it's come to my attention that some members of our lovely JFK assassination research community are, shall we say, not getting on that well together. This pains me deeply.
Ooh.
Can't we all just get along? I'd like to think we could all rub along together like my testicles under my sweatpants when I'm sitting at the drive-thru for McDonald's or one of the many other fine eateries I frequent multiple times on a daily basis. So, if I may make a cri de coeur, as my Canadian friend Glenn Oceanic might say, let's just try to agree that Alan Dulles was behind it all. Ed Lansdale was one of the three tramps in Dealey Plaza, and Jim Garrison was right about everything. Yours in Velcro sneakers, Tim. P.S. Try my new summer look of the well-tailored sports jacket accompanied by the free-flowing and looser sweatpants. It's a winner. Thumbs up. Oh, my God.
Oh.
Jeff, we can't write this shit, okay? These are our listeners.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I needed that.
Whew. All right. Last email here, we ended on a somewhat more serious note that we can all, extrapolate upon here.
We can extrapolate.
We have another email from our buddy from down under, Mr. Anthony Thripp.
All right.
Okay. And Doug, if you'll remember Anthony, he is our carpet salesman in Australia. We've tried to drum up business for in the past.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he says, "Hi guys, it's the carpet man from Australia here. Still waiting for my first order from North America, though. Keep up the great work. Your output this year has been sensational.
Well, thank you.
Here's my three quick hits, things that give me the shits. Number one, the movie JFK. I love it. It's a great movie, very entertaining and lots of thought-provoking scenes, but it's a Hollywood movie. Some people take it too seriously. It's just a movie. Get over it, people."
I'm with you.
Agreed? Jeff?
Well, yeah. I mean, we actually did recently an episode on this whole thing because there was a group that gathered at American University right after the film came out, and it was a great debate. Had Fletcher Prouty actually on the dais, among others, talking about whether or not it was historically accurate or whether it really was a work of fiction. And I have to tell you, it was highly, almost violently debated. Who's the researcher who is it? Dan? What is his name? The guy who
Dan Moldea. Yeah,
Moldea. Yeah, who's famous for the Hoffa, being a Hoffa expert. He was younger. He was a younger investigator then, and you have to watch it because it actually it's visceral between everybody, and I think it's an interesting. And the bottom line is there are absolute elements of fact in that, and then there's also editorial and creative fiction mixed in, and that's what makes it difficult because you don't know what's what really, and in some cases.
Well,
the main thing
the problem
is that it sparks an interest in the assassination, and that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line, and the best and the greatest thing about that movie. But when you have the problems with the people that insist that it's all 100% true, And because Fletcher Prouty and Jim Garrison, it's all 100% true, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Hey, can I go back? You guys are making me think about, we talked about authors. I put 3 on the list for consider. I don't know what you guys think, but, in the early days, there was guys like, Edward Epstein, yet Anthony Summers that, might be a good person or a kid, for that. How about David Lifton for Best Evidence? I mean, you may not agree with everything in there, but some of the stuff he did was groundbreaking.
That was my gateway book. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, his number 2 quick hit is Jim Garrison. I know he didn't get everything right, but just imagine being in your own workplace, for instance, and continually being undermined and sabotaged, having to second guess your every move and separate facts from frauds. And as we know, there's plenty of those in this case. So I think people should just use some perspective on the pressure he must have been under.
Yep.
I think his efforts are actually quite underrated. And of course, the synergistic energy between the emails and his show.
Yeah,
we've already discussed this at length. And
see our previous discussion, sir.
Yeah. Number 3, when the mainstream press report on new releases or on RFK Jr. as an example, they use the same old conspiracy theory bullshit like aliens and COVID misinformation. And in reality, it's just as much poor research and lazy journalism. Thanks for letting me share. Stay well, boys. Anthony Thripp, account manager in Victoria of Quest Carpets, a division of Quest Flooring. So if you're down under, folks, and you need some flooring or carpet, call Anthony Thripp at Quest Flooring, 43 through 55, Mark Anthony Drive, Danderdong, South Victoria.
I'm sure that no matter where you are in Australia, he will be glad to ship flooring to you. Absolutely.
For all your carpet munching needs, make sure to call him at +61 0400 840 709.
Put a little hot sauce on the carpet.
If that doesn't get you an order, Anthony, God damn it, I don't know what
That's right.
will.
Put a little hot sauce on the carpet. That's right. Well, thank you very much for the emails, guys. We appreciate it. Jeff, we are right up against it, brother. We're going to have to head out. JFK, The Enduring Secret, your podcast, sir. Jeff Crudele, everybody. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks again. It's an honor. It's a privilege and an honor to be on with you guys. I've had so much fun today. Thank you for being so inviting, and I just hope we can do it again sometime.
Dude, you will be back.
Absolutely.
You're on the list. You're in the circle, bro. You're in the circle. Rob, there's some music, brother.
Yes.
You're up. Tell us where we can find your stuff.
Right. Well, you can find it anywhere. Just Google the Lone Gunman Podcast. You can also follow along on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at the Lone Gunman 7. I just added the Instagram. It has funny music that correlates to each show. So there's a reason to go and follow me there. You might be the 3rd or 4th person at this point. But that'd be great. Other than that, I do this show with Doug, which you can find anywhere you listen to the Lone Gunman Podcast. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, YouTube, the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. Forgot about that one. Search for it. Make sure you like and subscribe. Doug.
Thank you very much, sir. And guys, you can find, follow, download, and listen to my podcast, the Dallas Action Podcast, presented by Wall Street Window at Spreaker.com or your Spreaker mobile app or everywhere you find quality podcasts. Guys, it's up to date, forward, moving forward, thinking, research, and analysis of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, like this show. Another fine podcast from Drop D Podcast Productions in the heart of Music Row, Music City, USA. So, for Rob Clark, for Mr. Jeff Crudele, and from Momo Scaranucci, this is Doug Campbell inviting you to tune in again next time when, upon being asked if he plans on attending any research conferences in person this year, we'll hear Bob Clark say,
I don't need to make personal appearances at this point in time in my career. I am on the top of my game. I'm on the prime of my game.
We are out.
Amen. Peace.
Le croissant.